Hi everyone, we hope you're doing well. We're hanging in there though honestly, we haven't been getting much sleep lately. Today, we want to answer a question we get a lot: how do we publish our audiobooks? First, we post most audiobooks on Patreon as paid content. They stay paid for a few months. After that, they become free to listen to on Patreon forever. A few weeks later, we post them on other places like YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, X. Lately, things have been a bit slow in terms of new members. So we'd love your help. Please share our site with your friends or in places like Facebook groups, Twitter, X, Discord, Reddit, or novel forums. Even one share can really help us grow. Thanks so much for your support, but Yoru was still not done reinforcing it. Cutting off his chakra output, Yoru continued repairing the seal. The Nine Tails looked at him in surprise. Brat, you actually know the Uzumaki clan sealing techniques? Who taught you? Yoru ignored it. But the Nine Tails didn't mind. Just moments ago, it had wanted to erase Yoru's consciousness. However, after witnessing the hidden power within him, it had given up on that idea. That power was far too strong. While Yoru's chakra reserves weren't as vast as its own, meaning he likely wouldn't be a match for it in the outside world, within this sealed space, with that mysterious power protecting him, his consciousness was impossible to erase. The Nine Tails now sought to understand Yoru better, recognizing him as the biggest obstacle to escaping from Naruto's body. Kid, stop wasting your energy. I can already see it. Naruto will rely more and more on my power in the future, borrowing greater amounts of my chakra each time. Your reinforced seal won't last long. That brat won't be able to resist the temptation of my power. Yoru frowned. It was true. But he also knew that in just a few years, Naruto would completely master the Nine Tails' power. He just needed to hold on until then. Seeing Yoru's expression shift, the Nine Tails sneered. Well? Give up already. Everything you're doing is pointless. Yoru lifted his head, meeting the beast's gaze with a smile. If what I'm doing is pointless, then why were you so agitated earlier? Is it because you realized I've ruined your little plan? The reason you keep offering Naruto chakra is to lure him into depending on your power, making sure he can never escape your influence, right? I know Naruto will use your power in the future, but I'll keep reinforcing the seal until he fully controls it. I bet that within a few years, he'll completely master your power. I bet that in the future, you'll never be able to escape his control. Yoru called it a bet, but in truth, he was merely stating what was destined to happen. In the future, the Nine Tails wouldn't even want to leave Naruto's body. Though Yoru's memory of Naruto's storyline was a bit hazy, he still recalled parts of the Fourth Great Ninja War. Without Naruto mastering the Nine Tails' power, that battle would have been nearly impossible to win. But the Nine Tails didn't believe him. Ha ha ha. Brat, do you realize how ridiculous you sound? Even Uzumaki Mido and Uzumaki Kushina, both with pure Uzumaki blood and mastery of their clan's sealing techniques, never dared to claim they had complete control over me. And you're telling me that Naruto, who only has half Uzumaki blood and doesn't even know sealing techniques, will fully master my power? If he could, you wouldn't even be here right now. You wouldn't need to reinforce his seal. The Nine Tails looked at Yoru with mocking disdain. But Yoru met its gaze, his voice steady. Because I'm betting on my own future, I believe I can help him master your power. For a moment, the entire space fell into silence. The Nine Tails furrowed its brows, staring at Yoru. Earlier, it had found his words laughable. But this statement, it couldn't refute. It didn't believe Naruto could control it in the future. But it did believe that Yoru could suppress it. Just like Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha once had. What the Nine Tails didn't know was that this was the first time Yoru had ever spoken about his own future with such confidence. Before, he had always felt uncertain about what lay ahead. But right now, he was completely calm, yet speaking words that seemed incredibly arrogant. Under normal circumstances, he wouldn't have said such things. But in this moment, he did. And he said them with absolute composure, as if stating a simple fact. The space remained silent for a long time. The Nine Tails did not refute him. As it looked at Yoru, for a brief moment, it saw the same presence that had once suppressed it, Hashirama Senju. And in its eyes, Yoru was simply stating the truth. A truth it least wanted to hear. Chapter 89. The space remained silent for a long time. The Nine Tails, which had been filled with rage, gradually suppressed its emotions. For once, it didn't lash out in its usual fury. Instead, it remained quiet, lying down in its cage with its massive fox head resting on its front paws. It seemed to have given up on resisting. Yes, it could look down on Naruto. Yes, it could refuse to believe that Naruto wouldn't eventually give it a chance to break free. But so what? As long as that boy existed, even if it broke the seal, What meaning would it have? If things played out like before, and it was captured and sealed again, it would truly lose all dignity. The Nine-Tails sighed. Old man Six Paths, ever since you left, this shinobi world has become incredibly frustrating for me. I finally get the weakest Jinchuriki in generations, only for this kid to show up. Are you cursing me from the afterlife? It let out another sigh. It had abandoned the idea of struggling. At first, it had believed Naruto was the weakest among the 3 Jinchuriki it had been sealed in. It thought it could gradually erode the seal while Naruto recklessly relied on its chakra. But Yorua's appearance changed everything. Even if the Nine-Tails broke free, it wouldn't matter. Yorua had the ability to capture and reseal it. Right now, Yorua didn't possess that power, at least, not yet. At this moment, he was not its match. But the Nine-Tails was highly sensitive to strength. It knew that it wouldn't take long before Yorua grew strong enough to suppress it completely, perhaps even reaching the level of Hashirama Senju. The mere thought of that name filled the Nine-Tails with irritation. Yet, it had no choice but to acknowledge it. From Yorua, it could see the shadow of Hashirama, or perhaps someone with even greater potential. Because in its estimation, at Yorua's current age, Hashirama hadn't been nearly this powerful. Even Yorua himself wasn't fully aware of his own strength. But the Nine-Tails, being highly attuned to power, could tell, at this moment, Yorua's strength had already reached the level of a Kage. Whether he had surpassed that level, the Nine-Tails wasn't sure. It hadn't seen Yorua fight yet. But just the mysterious force residing in Yorua's body was enough for the Nine-Tails to see the boundless potential in his future. Meanwhile, Yorua was somewhat surprised. He muttered to himself, this fox isn't resisting anymore. That's kind of strange. He had assumed the Nine-Tails was secretly preparing a big attack. He never expected that it had simply given up. His presence alone had completely erased the Nine-Tails' desire to break free. After all, what was the point of escaping if it was just going to get captured and sealed again? What the Nine-Tails didn't know was that Yorua remained extremely cautious. As he reinforced the seal, he kept a close watch on it. This continued for about an hour. Eventually, Yorua finished strengthening the sealing technique inside Naruto's body, making it even more secure. The Nine-Tails could feel it. Due to Yorua's chakra, the newly reinforced 8-trigram seal was far stronger than the one placed by Minato no Mikeji. The difference was crystal clear. This only deepened the Nine-Tails' suspicions. There was an incredibly powerful force hidden within Yorua. Because after Yorua reinforced Minato's seal, it had become several times stronger than the original version. Previously, the Nine-Tails could slowly seep out chakra and corrode the seal Minato left behind. But now, it realized that its chakra could not corrode the new sealing technique left by Yorua. That's right, Yorua, worried that merely reinforcing Minato no Mikeji's seal wouldn't be secure enough, had added another 8-trigram seal. The reinforced version of Minato's seal could still be eroded, though it was significantly stronger than before. If the Nine-Tails continuously leaked its chakra to corrode it, there was still a chance of breaking through. But the additional 8-trigram seal Yorua had placed, no matter what it tried, its chakra couldn't erode it at all. In other words, the seal left by Yorua was something it simply couldn't break. At least, not with its own power. Unless Yorua himself released it, or Naruto did. The Nine-Tails furrowed its brow. Its fox-like eyes stared intently at Yorua. Brat, you actually added another seal? Aren't you afraid of exhausting all your chakra? At that moment, Yorua's face looked a little pale. You're not wrong. I almost ran out of chakra. Sealing techniques really do consume a lot. Looks like my chakra reserves are still too low. The Nine-Tails twitched its mouth slightly. Seeing Yorua's serious expression, it nearly cursed out loud. This brat had risked exhausting his own chakra just to add yet another sealing technique. And even though it was the same 8-trigram seal, it was several times stronger than the one Minato had left behind. With its current abilities, it had no way to break through. The new seal Yorua left behind was far more resilient than Minato's, and naturally, it had consumed multiple times the chakra as well. Yet Yorua's chakra reserves were far greater than Minato's. Minato had a lot of chakra, but it simply couldn't compare to Yorua's. Not to mention, Yorua's chakra was fundamentally different from ordinary chakra. But regardless of that, everything Yorua had done was for the sake of sealing it. There was no way it could feel happy about that. However, what truly shocked the Nine-Tails was that, just 10 minutes later, Yorua's chakra had fully recovered. Just 10 minutes. The Nine-Tails was completely stunned. Your chakra actually recovered? Yorua's complexion had returned to normal. He stood up with a relaxed expression. Running out of chakra really doesn't feel good. Alright, I should be going. See you around, Nine-Tails. With that, Yorua turned and prepared to leave. Wait. The Nine-Tails quickly called out to him. Yorua frowned slightly but didn't leave. Instead, he turned to look at the Nine-Tails. Something else? The Nine-Tails held back its words for a long moment before finally asking, "What exactly is that brat Naruto to you? Why are you willing to go this far for him?" Yorua paused for a moment, then chuckled. "I'm just doing what I think is right. Naruto is a friend, I suppose. And he's someone very important to Hidden Leaf Village. I can't let anything happen to him. Everything I've done is simply to help him control your power in the future. I believe he'll succeed. But until then, I don't want you causing him any trouble. After all, if you break free, it'll be a huge problem for me as well. Right now, I'm still not your match. If you were to escape at this moment, I doubt anyone in Hidden Leaf Village could seal you back again." Yorua's tone was calm. If anyone else had said those words, the Nine-Tails would have blasted them with a tail beast bomb without hesitation. But since it was Yorua saying it, it felt nothing. Among those who could speak to it like this in the shinobi world, the Nine-Tails only acknowledged the Sage of the Six Paths, his sons Indra and Azura, as well as Madara Uchiha and Hashirama Senju. Not even Mido Uzumaki or Kushina Uzumaki, who had sealed it for decades, were recognized by it. Yet when Yorua spoke, the Nine-Tails didn't doubt for a second that he could do exactly as he said. It was just curious as to why he was willing to go this far. It still remembered clearly, Naruto and Yorua weren't exactly close. Naruto had even treated Yorua as a rival before. Back then, the Nine-Tails didn't know who Yorua was or what he looked like. But after some thought, it could now tell, the person Naruto had talked about was Yorua. Chapter 90. The Nine-Tails looked at Yorua and said coldly, "You go to such lengths for Naruto, yet that brat sees you as a rival. In his mind, your image isn't exactly great." These words weren't meant to sow discord, the Nine-Tails was simply curious. Naruto clearly didn't think much of Yorua, so why would Yorua go this far? Yorua understood what the Nine-Tails was saying, but he didn't care. "I know. He's just a kid, jealousy is natural. Besides, that's just how he is. I'm well aware that he sees me as a rival, but I believe that if I were ever in danger, he wouldn't hesitate to save me. Being seen as a rival isn't a bad thing. At the very least, it motivates me to keep getting stronger, and it gives him someone to chase after. As long as I keep improving, he'll have to push himself to grow too. In the end, it benefits both of us." Yorua didn't care what Naruto thought. At this stage, Naruto still had a childish mindset. After all, he was only 12 years old. But Yorua knew that once Naruto grew up, he wouldn't be the same as he was now. Not to mention, Yorua and Naruto weren't even on the same team. Naruto's attitude didn't really matter to him. Everything he had just said to the Nine-Tails was, in truth, just to fool it. Yorua knew exactly how Naruto would turn out in the future. Naruto would never truly see him as an enemy. And even if he did, so what? Yorua had absolute confidence that his future would be no worse than Naruto's, he might even surpass him. So why bother worrying about such trivial things? Perhaps it was because he had spent so much time fooling Sasuke and Naruto in the past that now, facing the Nine-Tails, Yorua naturally started making things up again. Whether it was true or not, or how much of it was true, he didn't care. He'd forget about it in a while anyway. But the Nine-Tails believed him. Because Yorua spoke with complete seriousness, without the slightest change in his emotions. There was no malice in his tone. That meant he must be telling the truth. The Nine-Tails was baffled. "Brat, you're just a kid yourself, yet you talk as if you're not?" It found Yorua's attitude ridiculous. He spoke as if Naruto was a child while excluding himself from that category. Yorua said calmly, "I may be young, but that doesn't mean I'm a child." The Nine-Tails assumed he was just being stubborn. But Yorua wasn't wrong, his soul had never been that of a child. The Nine-Tails sneered, "Even if you're strong, at the end of the day, you're still just a kid. And you don't lack any of the typical childish thoughts." Yorua didn't bother arguing with the Nine-Tails. He simply turned and prepared to leave. But after walking a few steps, he stopped. With his back to the Nine-Tails, he said, "Honestly, I think you should just accept Naruto. Do you really want to spend your whole life trapped in a Jinchuriki, carrying your hatred forever? If you accept Naruto, at least you'll have a bit more freedom. And that brat, he has a lot of potential. Don't you think?" The Nine-Tails snorted. "Dream on. You think I'd submit to that kid? Keep dreaming." Yorua shook his head, then turned to look at the Nine-Tails. "I'm curious, why do you have so much resentment? You know that as long as the Jinchuriki system exists, you tailed beasts will always be trapped inside a host, right? Whether it was the first Hokage's wife, the fourth Hokage's wife, or now Naruto, even if you don't accept him, there will always be another Jinchuriki after him. You're not getting out. And even if you did, you'd just be captured and sealed again, whether by Hidden Leaf Village's shinobi or another village's. But if you accept Naruto, at least you could have some freedom. You wouldn't have to spend every day in this dark prison. Who knows? Maybe you could even gain a friend in Naruto. Roar. A deafening roar, that was the Nine-Tails' response. Yaruo shook his head. Stubborn as ever. This is the only chance you have to gain some freedom. Otherwise, all that awaits you is an endless cycle of sealing. What's the point? Humphrey. You think I'd submit to that brat? On what grounds? Is he Senju Hashirama? Or the Sage of Six Paths? Yaruo paused for a moment. He knew about the Sage of Six Paths, but he hadn't expected the Nine-Tails to mention him. The Sage of Six Paths? Seeing Yorua's puzzled expression, the Nine-Tails chuckled. Don't tell me you don't know about him. Of course I do, he's the legendary founder of the shinobi world. The tales of the Sage of Six Paths were well known across the ninja world. But since so much time had passed, people treated him more like a mythical figure than a real person. Many shinobi didn't even believe he had ever existed. Yorua's response was exactly what the academy taught. Naturally, he knew who the Sage of Six Paths was, but there was no way he would reveal that to the Nine-Tails. Besides, it had been so long that most of the stories about the sage had faded from memory. All he really remembered was that the sage had given Naruto and Sasuke their Six Paths powers. That he was Kaguya Otsutsuki's son. And that he had sealed her away. So Yorua's reaction wasn't entirely an act. The Nine-Tails smirked. He truly was the founder of the shinobi world. But people only repeat his legend, they have no idea how powerful he really was. As it spoke, the Nine-Tails' mind drifted back over 1,000 years. Even its own memories of that time had started to blur. Seeing the Nine-Tails lost in thought, Yorua turned to leave. The Nine-Tails was exasperated. You're really that impatient? You won't even listen to the rest? Yorua truly wasn't interested. He could already guess what the Nine-Tails was going to say. He just couldn't recall the finer details. But that didn't matter. He had no intention of memorizing it anyway. As long as he was strong enough, by the time the Fourth Great Ninja War arrived, even if he wasn't some destined savior, he was confident he could at least protect his own life. So he had no interest in the Sage of Six Paths stories. But for some reason, the Nine-Tails felt that Yorua was different from the others. Whether it was Indra, Azura, Hashirama, Madara, Mido Uzumaki, or Kushina Uzumaki, none of them had ever really spoken to it like this. They had all treated it as a disaster, a monster. Though Yorua had reinforced the seal, making the Nine-Tails want to tear him apart, after talking for so long, it could sense that Yorua, like the Sage of Six Paths, truly saw it as. Chapter 91. That was why, after all these years, the Nine-Tails had never harbored any goodwill toward humans. Because nearly everyone, including powerhouses like Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha, had only ever treated it as a weapon, a monster. But Yorua was different. He truly treated it as an equal, as someone to communicate with. Moreover, Yorua's strength and personality had earned its acknowledgement, though, of course, the Nine-Tails would never admit that out loud. And in this, the Nine-Tails wasn't wrong. To Yorua, intelligent beings were all the same. Whether human, tailed beast, or a sentient summon, he would always treat them equally and communicate with them on even ground. It was a natural perspective, after all, just like yokai and ordinary animals were fundamentally different species, so too did Yorua see a clear distinction. Growing impatient, Yorua turned to the Nine-Tails. Then hurry up and say it already. I hate it when people talk in circles. The Nine-Tails shot him a glare. If you were my Jinchuriki, I'd probably have to fight you every day from childhood, you're way too impatient. Can't you just let someone finish talking? What the Nine-Tails didn't realize was that it had never said such words to anyone other than the Sage of Six Paths. On the surface, it sounded like it was simply complaining about Yorua. But in reality, it had already acknowledged him. And if one thought about it carefully, there was an even deeper implication. Deep down, the Nine-Tails wanted Yorua to be its Jinchuriki. Of course, Yorua wasn't the type to overanalyze things like that. Nor did he need to. He would have to be out of his mind to willingly become the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki. Given the source of his own power, the Nine-Tails wouldn't even be much of an asset to him. In truth, if Yorua wanted to become the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, he could easily do so in the future. Once his strength was sufficient, he could take the yin half of the Nine-Tails sealed inside Minato Namikage's body and transfer it into himself. Minato was already dead anyway, and sealing the yin Nine-Tails within himself wouldn't cause any real loss to anyone. But Yorua would never do such a thing. Nor had he ever even considered it. Yorua ignored the Nine-Tails' words and simply gazed at it calmly. The Nine-Tails, afraid that Yorua would just leave, didn't even realize how differently it saw him compared to others. Perhaps it was because, in over 1,000 years, Yoru was the first person truly willing to communicate with it as an equal. The Sage of Six Paths was a figure from over 1,000 years ago. The Nine Tails began. He was the one who created Ninshu, the predecessor of the modern ninja system. Yoru nodded. This aligned with the legends of the shinobi world. Noticing Yoru's growing impatience, the Nine Tails continued. The Sage of Six Paths had two sons, Indra and Azura. Indra was the elder brother, Azura the younger. Each inherited a different part of the sage's power. Indra received his eyes, while Azura inherited his body. Yoru glanced at the Nine Tails. And what does this have to do with the Sage of Six Paths? Don't be so impatient. Let me explain things properly. The Nine Tails grumbled. It was honestly exasperated. After all these years, it had finally found someone it was willing to talk to, yet this guy was so damn impatient. Yoru didn't respond further and simply gestured for the Nine Tails to continue. The Nine Tails shot him a glare before continuing. Do you know what kind of powers the Sage of Six Paths possessed? The Sage of Six Paths? Yoru repeated. According to legend, he had the power to create worlds and destroy them at will. The Nine Tails thought for a moment, then nodded. That's right. The sage did indeed possess that level of power. This actually surprised Yoru, partly as an act, but also because he had always believed that kind of power only belonged to Kaguya Otsutsuki. Seeing Yoru's reaction, the Nine Tails chuckled. What's the matter? You don't believe me? It's a bit hard to believe. Yoru admitted. It sounds like something straight out of a myth. The Nine Tails let out a small laugh. That's understandable. Most modern shinobi probably think the same way. But all I'll say is this, if anything, the sage's power was even greater than the legends claim. Oh? Yoru looked at the Nine Tails, intrigued. The Nine Tails, perhaps because it had finally found someone willing to talk to it, seemed eager to share stories of the past. It was worth noting that even after acknowledging Naruto, the Nine Tails had never told him these things. But with Yoru, the feeling he gave it was eerily similar to what it once felt around the Sage of Six Paths. The Nine Tails nodded. Yes. Incredibly powerful. Do you know how many tailed beasts exist in this world? Yoru nodded. I've read about it, there are 9. This surprised the Nine Tails. It glanced at Yoru. You know more than I expected. Many shinobi don't even know the exact number of tailed beasts in existence. Yoru didn't react much to the comment. He actually found it pretty ridiculous. Naruto was one thing, but even Kakashi had very limited knowledge about the tailed beasts, despite the fact that information about them was readily available in Hidden Leaf Village's archives. A lot of basic knowledge could be found simply by looking it up. And yet, Kakashi seemed unaware. Over the years, in order to avoid standing out too much, Yoru had never gone overboard with his training. He only did enough to pass, aiming for competence, not perfection. Naturally, that left him with a lot of free time, which he often spent reading and studying theoretical knowledge. This habit had also ensured that he consistently scored high on every written exam. In fact, he was more than capable of getting a perfect score, but he intentionally held back, ensuring his scores remained high yet not too. Was always the highest score. At the Ninja Academy, Sakura consistently achieved perfect scores on every theoretical exam. This was also the reason she, as a civilian, was able to attend the academy in the first place. Although Sasuke had always been the top student in their class, that ranking was based on overall performance. In terms of pure theoretical knowledge, his scores never surpassed Sakura's. Or rather, aside from Yoru, no one in the class could match Sakura when it came to theory. Since Yoru deliberately held back on his scores, Sakura always ranked first in theory exams. In Hidden Leaf Village's public library, many records about the ninja world were available. That included information on the tailed beasts. Even without relying on his past life's memories, Yoru's understanding of the tailed beasts was already greater than Kakashi's. This left Yoru speechless. He even started to suspect that Kakashi had graduated from the academy too early, focusing only on combat skills while completely neglecting theoretical studies. Many ninjas in the shinobi world were just like Kakashi, lacking detailed knowledge of fundamental theories. But that wasn't too surprising. After all, ninja training primarily focused on combat skills. Apart from administrative ninja roles, most combat-oriented shinobi didn't need to have a deep grasp of theory. Basic knowledge was sufficient. Going too deep wasn't necessary, or useful. The Nine Tails had been sealed for decades. During its time within Kushina Uzumaki, Mido Uzumaki, and later Naruto, it had occasionally picked up bits and pieces of knowledge. Realizing that Yoru was well informed, the Nine Tails continued. Actually, the nine-tailed beasts of the ninja world were originally part of a single entity. Yoru blinked. Huh? What do you mean? The Nine Tails looked at him seriously. Exactly what it sounds like. You're saying the Sage of Six Paths split one beast into 9? The Nine Tails chuckled. You're quick to catch on. That's right, we were once part of a creature called the Ten Tails. Back then, the Sage of Six Paths was the Ten Tails Jinchuriki. The Sage of Six Paths was a Jinchuriki? Then that means that beast must have been ridiculously strong. Yoru couldn't help but be amazed. The Nine Tails let out a low laugh. It was indeed powerful. The Ten Tails possessed the power to destroy the world. In fact, much of the sage's strength came from it. Before passing away, the sage feared that the Ten Tails would bring disaster upon the world, so he split its chakra into 9 parts, the 9-tailed beasts of today. Yoru was truly shocked. It was a genuine reaction. He had vague memories of this from before, but now, hearing it again, it still left him stunned. After a long silence, Yoru raised his head and asked, if the Ten Tails was that powerful, does that mean it could return to this world someday? The Nine Tails sighed. Theoretically, yes. Then, looking at Yoru, it smirked. What's wrong? Are you scared? Yoru thought for a moment before answering, not exactly. I don't have a clear understanding of just how powerful the Ten Tails really is. I'm just curious, how would it even be revived? The Nine Tails was surprised. You're not afraid? Yoru chuckled. I mean, I'd like to be, but I can't even begin to imagine what world-destroying power really looks like. Is it like you? Or is it thousands of times stronger? The Nine Tails was momentarily stunned, then burst into laughter. Ha ha ha. Kid, you're pretty interesting to think about it that way. But soon, its expression turned serious. You don't understand, the Ten Tails' power surpasses mine by an unimaginable degree. It truly has the power to destroy this world. The maximum destruction I can cause with my full-strength chakra blast might span a few dozen kilometers at most. But a single-tailed beast ball from the Ten Tails could wipe out thousands of kilometers in an instant. Yoru stared at the Nine Tails as if it were joking. Thousands of kilometers? His reaction was genuine. In his memories of the Fourth Great Ninja War, he recalled it being a battle of gods, but he hadn't realized a single-tailed beast ball could cover such a massive distance. After all, no one really stopped to think about the specifics, they just got the general idea. But if it was really on the scale of thousands of kilometers, that meant a single blast from the Ten Tails could wipe an entire great nation off the map. That level of power was completely beyond Yoru's comprehension. Chapter 92. The Nine Tails nodded. That's right, it's just that powerful. This is also a power capable of destroying the world. Yoru was silent for a long time before agreeing. Indeed, if it's true, it's not surprising that the Ten Tails possesses world-destroying power. But is it really true? A single-tailed beast bomb that can destroy everything within thousands of kilometers, it all sounds too fantastical. The Nine Tails sighed. It's true. Then if the Ten Tails is so powerful, how did the Sage of Six Paths manage to seal it within himself? The Nine Tails thought for a moment and said, the Ten Tails was originally sealed within the body of the Sage of Six Paths' mother, Kaguya Otsutsuki. Kaguya Otsutsuki? The Nine Tails nodded solemnly. Yes, Kaguya Otsutsuki. She was like a god, and she possessed the power to suppress the Ten Tails. Kaguya Otsutsuki was the first Jinchuriki of the Ten Tails. It's said that she ate a fruit from the divine tree, which gave her the power to control the Ten Tails. And Kaguya Otsutsuki is the ancestor of chakra. It was she who spread chakra throughout the ninja world. Although Yoru knew a bit about this, hearing it from the Nine Tails was still quite shocking. What surprised Yoru even more was that the Nine Tails actually knew these things and was willing to share them with him. The ancestor of chakra, truly myth-like. The Nine Tails, thinking Yoru didn't believe him, continued, it's said that Kaguya Otsutsuki came from beyond the heavens, that she was a divine emissary sent to the mortal world. Yoru muttered internally, divine emissary, just the Otsutsuki clan. However, people tend to mystify things they don't understand. But because Kaguya Otsutsuki was seduced by power and planned to reclaim all the chakra in the world, many people died. To stop her, the Sage of Six Paths and his brother sealed their mother on the moon. The Nine Tails continued. Yoru was surprised, was the Sage of Six Paths really that strong? The Nine Tails said, the Sage of Six Paths and his brother inherited their mother's power, and ultimately used that power to seal Kaguya Otsutsuki. After sealing Kaguya Otsutsuki, the Sage of Six Paths extracted the Ten Tails from her body and sealed it within himself, becoming the second Jinchuriki of the Ten Tails. Yoru frowned. The Nine Tails said, so, do you have a better understanding of the Sage of Six Paths' power now? Yoru nodded. If what you say is true, then the Sage of Six Paths truly had the power to destroy the world, just like in the legends. But is it really true? Yoru looked at the Nine Tails with skepticism. The Nine-Tails laughed in exasperation. Do I have any reason to lie to you? Yoru thought for a moment and said, indeed, there's no reason. It's just that this information is beyond my imagination, and I find it hard to digest all at once. The Nine-Tails lay on the ground and said indifferently, that's why I only acknowledge strong individuals like the Sage of Six Paths. I will never acknowledge that brat Naruto. He doesn't deserve to make me submit to him. Yoru, not planning to leave for the time being, sat cross-legged opposite the Nine-Tails and asked, you seem to know a lot about the past. Besides the Sage of Six Paths, you must know about many other strong individuals, right? The Nine-Tails glanced at Yoru, knowing what he was trying to do. But the Nine-Tails, in its pride, closed its eyes. Yoru adjusted his glasses. I've already told you enough. How much more do you want to know from me? But kid, here's a piece of advice. The people of Hidden Leaf Village aren't easy to deal with. You don't have enough power to protect yourself yet, so it's best to keep a low profile. Hiding your strength won't do you any harm. Yoru smiled. I don't need you to remind me of that. I know what to do. I'll give you a piece of advice too. You'd better cooperate well with Naruto, it will be beneficial for you. Humphrey, don't even think about it. The Nine-Tails glared coldly at Yoru. Yoru shrugged, you're really stubborn, no wonder you've had such a miserable time all these years. Alright, I'll take a step back. At least don't cause him any more trouble, okay? Just watch him grow from within. I believe one day you'll acknowledge him. After all, he has the blood of the Uzumaki clan, and he's the son of the fourth Hokage. I have high hopes for him. I think he will definitely surpass his parents in the future, and might even surpass the first Hokage. As soon as Yoru finished speaking, the Nine-Tails laughed. Ha ha ha. Kid, you're dreaming. If he can reach his mother's level, that would be impressive enough. As for reaching the fourth Hokage's level, what does he have to achieve that? That guy doesn't have the same talent as the fourth Hokage. And surpassing Hashirama Senju? That's even more ridiculous. Do you know how strong Hashirama Senju was? Even though I don't like that bastard, I have to admit he was the strongest ninja in the past few hundred years. The god of shinobi, truly deserving of the title, without any exaggeration. If you said you could surpass Hashirama Senju, I might believe it, and I think there's a good chance. But Naruto? Forget it, don't kid yourself. Yoru murmured to himself, that's because you don't know his potential. Thinking of Naruto's performance during the Fourth Great Ninja War and when he and Sasuke sealed Kaguya Otsutsuki, Yoru knew the Nine-Tails underestimated Naruto. In the future, surpassing Hashirama Senju was nothing. Naruto would possess Six Paths level power, and he and Sasuke even sealed away the super-strong Kaguya Otsutsuki. After the Fourth Great Ninja War, Naruto's strength made him one of the strongest ninjas in the ninja world, with the power to destroy the world. Yoru understood Naruto well and naturally disagreed with the Nine-Tails' judgment. Looking at the Nine-Tails, Yoru said, anyway, I hope you won't cause him trouble in the future. Even if you don't acknowledge him, at least don't let him go berserk. The Nine-Tails replied indifferently, that's not something I can control. That kid is a Jinchuriki and inherently has the ability to draw on part of my chakra. If he loses control of his emotions, there's a high chance he'll go berserk. Yoru knew this too. Under the influence of the 8 trigram seal, the Nine-Tails could only control itself not to give most of its chakra to Naruto. If Naruto went berserk, a portion of the chakra would be extracted by the 8 trigram seal and given to Naruto. Although this portion was only a small part of its total chakra, because of its immense chakra reserves, it could still overwhelm Naruto and cause him to lose consciousness. Then just don't provoke him. Chapter 93 Yoru chuckled and said, you don't have to believe me, it's just a suggestion. The Nine-Tails, who had been somewhat tempted, now glared coldly at Yoru, making him feel uneasy. Why are you looking at me like that? You're the one who doesn't believe. Yoru said. The Nine-Tails lay down, closing its eyes, clearly showing it didn't want to continue the conversation. Realizing he couldn't persuade the Nine-Tails, Yoru stood up, intending to leave. If you don't want to, that's fine. Just try not to actively use your chakra to tempt him in the future. After all, it's the Nine-Tails chakra, and he can't resist that kind of temptation. Besides, I think constantly enticing him to use your chakra doesn't benefit either of you. It's a lose-lose situation, so why do it? Yoru looked at the Nine-Tails. It kept its eyes shut, ignoring him. Get lost already, I want to sleep. It grumbled. Yoru was a bit speechless but not angry at the Nine-Tails' attitude. He knew its personality well. Then I'll be off. See you around, though hopefully not, haha. With that, Yoru vanished from the sealed space. Only after he left did the Nine-Tails open its eyes. Gazing at the now empty cell, the Nine-Tails felt an inexplicable emptiness. Over the years, Yorua was the first to speak with it as an equal, though sometimes it found him quite annoying. But precisely because it saw Yorua as someone it could communicate with, it felt this way. If it had been anyone else, it wouldn't just be annoyed, it would be furious. Looking at the empty cell, the Nine-Tails muttered to itself, I wonder if that kid will come again. Better if he doesn't, his words are infuriating, sigh. Despite saying this, the Nine-Tails felt a bit lonely. Perhaps the reason Naruto could gain the Nine-Tails' approval in just a few months was that it needed someone to communicate with and listen to its thoughts. Originally, Naruto should have been the second person after the Sage of Six Paths, but Yorua unexpectedly became the second. Looking at the now black and gold cell, the Nine-Tails smiled. That kid's power is quite strong. The 8 trigram seal is much stronger than Minato no Mikage's. However, Yorua's 8 trigram seal was different from Minato's in that the cell was several times larger and much brighter. Compared to Minato's seal, Yorua improved its living conditions. This was Yorua's intention. He saw no need to make the Nine-Tails suffer unnecessarily, as it would only grow to hate humans more. Moreover, a better environment for the Nine-Tails would facilitate future communication with Naruto. Otherwise, the Nine-Tails might vent its resentment towards humans on Naruto. Yorua wasn't doing this because he had a particularly good relationship with Naruto. He just didn't want Naruto's potential rampages to trouble him. After all, Yorua was currently the only one in Hidden Leaf Village with a sealing technique strong enough to contain the Nine-Tails. He probably couldn't refuse anyway. After all, he's a part of Hidden Leaf Village, and this kind of thing is something he definitely has to do. Yorua has quite an appreciation for Hidden Leaf Village. As for the political struggles among the higher-ups, they have nothing to do with him. Compared to the other major nations, Hidden Leaf Village's atmosphere is the most suitable and the place Yorua is most willing to stay. Naturally, if the village needs him for something, he won't refuse to do what he can. Moreover, Naruto is the future savior, and there's no harm in establishing a good relationship with him in advance. Compared to having enemies, Yorua prefers to have more friends. More friends mean more paths. Even if he has some demands of Naruto, having more friends is clearly more comfortable than having more enemies. The Nine-Tails looked at the now more spacious and brighter cage. Although it was still a cage, it was much better than before. You have to know, when it was inside Uzumaki Mido and Uzumaki Kushina, its body was nailed to a massive magma rock. Even though it was a chakra entity, it still felt pain. It lived like that for decades, which is why Yorua can understand the Nine-Tails' resentment towards humans. Living like that for decades, anyone would find it impossible to have any goodwill towards those who did such things, and not wanting to kill them would be considered Stockholm Syndrome. Later, the Nine-Tails was sealed inside Naruto by Minato no Mikage. Although the environment was better than before, it was still quite poor, with the entire cage being a dark, damp cell. Now, Yorua had renovated the cell. Although it was still a cell, the Nine-Tails could move more freely within it, and the environment was much better. Of course, Yorua also maintained a greater output of chakra. Otherwise, just a 8 trigram seal wouldn't be enough to drain Yorua's chakra. The Nine-Tails naturally knew this, and though Yorua didn't mention it earlier, it didn't bring it up either. But in truth, it was aware, it knew what Yorua had done. Additionally, Yorua was the first person in 1,000 years willing to communicate with it on equal terms. For the Nine-Tails, even if it was just the first meeting and only a few hours of conversation, Yorua was different from other humans. In fact, Yorua held a status in its heart akin to the Sage of Six Paths. Of course, when facing Yorua, it would never express such feelings. Inside the cage, the Nine-Tails sighed, the ninja world is so dark, I wonder if that guy will end up in trouble. Hey, with that guy's personality, how could he? If anyone's going to get into trouble, it's others. His personality is so nasty, I bet the rest of the ninja world will have a hard time, ha ha ha. The Nine-Tails genuinely hoped that Yorua wouldn't die young. Although Yorua's talent was extremely high and he harbored a very powerful force within him, a genius who hasn't matured isn't truly a genius. Right now, Yorua's strength, though much greater than his peers, still wasn't strong enough. At least in the Nine-Tails' eyes, Yorua's strength was at the Kage level, and among Kage level, he was quite strong. But he definitely hadn't reached the level of masters like Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha. Of course, Yorua was only 12 years old, so expecting him to reach the level of Madara Uchiha and Senju Hashirama at this age would be too harsh. Yorua himself felt that having Kage-level strength at his age was quite remarkable. Previously, Yorua thought that reaching Elite Jonin level within half a year was already extraordinary. The current level of strength was something he never imagined or dared to imagine before. This speed of power increase could probably only be compared to Naruto during the Fourth Shinobi World War when the Sage of Six Paths directly granted him Six Paths level power. Despite the Nine Tails not having many kind words for Yorua earlier, it now showed more concern for him, sincerely hoping that Yorua wouldn't meet a downfall in the ninja world. Over the past 1,000 years, the Nine Tails had seen too many such cases. In the past 1,000 years of the ninja world, there have been many exceptionally talented ninjas, but most never grew to the level of masters like Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha. Instead, they perished young in the battles of the ninja world. Chapter 94 Yorua, emerging from Naruto's seal space, was naturally unaware of what the Nine Tails said afterward. Once his consciousness returned to his body, Yorua withdrew his hand. The tailed beast cloak on Naruto disappeared as well. However, Naruto had fainted. On Naruto's abdomen, the original seal pattern had changed. It was now replaced by a black and gold 8 trigram seal. After Yorua's chakra was drained earlier, his face was pale, but now it had already recovered. Other ninjas might need a whole day to recover their chakra, requiring sleep and a lot of food. But Yorua only needed at most 10 minutes. Moreover, he didn't need food to replenish his strength. He absorbed natural energy directly from the environment, and part of this natural energy would convert into Yorua's own chakra. Another part would nourish Yorua's body, healing his injuries. The Nine Tails thinking Yorua was somewhat similar to Hashirama Senju wasn't without reason. Yorua himself didn't know this because, apart from being attacked by the Nine Tails just now, he hadn't suffered any injuries. In fact, Yorua's body's recovery ability was incredibly strong, almost catching up to Hashirama Senju. Moreover, Hashirama needed to consume his own chakra for healing. Yorua, on the other hand, absorbed natural energy directly from the environment for recovery. Theoretically, as long as Yorua wasn't killed, no matter how severe his injuries, he would recover quickly. Of course, it's not exaggerated, if the injuries are too severe, the recovery time would be longer. So, Yorua, who had his chakra drained and was pale just moments ago, now looked normal, and his chakra was abundant. After settling Naruto, Yorua went to the balcony to stretch his body. He looked at Kakashi and the others standing several hundred meters away from the house. Yorua waved at them with a smile. Kakashi-sensei, it's all fine now, come back. Under the moonlight, Kakashi and the others looked at Yorua on the balcony, and Kakashi breathed a sigh of relief. I knew he wouldn't be in trouble, truly worthy of being my student. Sakura and Sasuke, who were initially quite happy, immediately had a change in expression upon hearing Kakashi's words. Sasuke recalled the times he and his brother competed for their father's approval, all for words like these. Hearing Kakashi say it now, even though he no longer had any grudges against Yorua, he still felt uncomfortable. Sakura, being straightforward, voiced her thoughts. Hey, Kakashi-sensei, we're your students too, but your attention is always on Yorua. At least pay some attention to us. Sakura was a bit jealous. Of course, she had no issues with Yorua, in fact, because Yorua had saved her several times, his position in her heart could even compare to Sasuke. It's just that when children hear elders, especially their teachers, praise their classmates, they tend to get jealous. Kakashi scratched his head awkwardly. Haha, Sakura, don't say that, I pay a lot of attention to you guys too. Sakura turned her head away. Humphrey, your eyes are on Yorua all day long, where do you have time for us? Kakashi also felt a bit helpless. However, Yorua indeed held a higher place in his heart. Sasuke, Naruto, and Sakura were important to Kakashi, but they were more of a task assigned by the third Hokage. Before he even met the three of them, Kakashi hadn't considered taking them on. Even after accepting the role, he initially saw himself merely as their jonin leader, viewing the three as subordinates. Having just left the Anbu, Kakashi was still quite mindful of hierarchy. Treating Sasuke and the others as subordinates wasn't an issue at first. Typically, the relationship between a jonin leader and their genin team is just like that. It was only after the three of them passed the bell test that he truly began to see them as his students. However, there was still a difference compared to his relationship with Yorua. Of course, after spending time together, he found it easier to get along with Yorua. Sasuke, Naruto, and Sakura each had distinct personalities, and Kakashi often found it challenging to interact with them. There were several occasions where, if not for Yorua stepping in, Kakashi wouldn't have known how to handle the situation. He might have had to resort to exerting pressure as a teacher, but that approach clearly wouldn't have been effective. Hearing Sakura's comment, Kakashi realized he might have been focusing too much on Yorua. Yorua's strength had grown to the point where he didn't need constant supervision to prevent accidents. Now, aside from sharing life experiences and ninja wisdom, Kakashi felt he had little left to teach Yorua. Reflecting on it, Kakashi thought it was like a dream. In just over a month, that child has grown so much. Just like the fourth Hokage, he doesn't need a teacher to worry about him. Jiraiya had once shared stories about Minato no Mikaze with Kakashi. When Jiraiya mentored Minato, he mostly let him develop independently. If not for Minato's high talent and eagerness to learn, he might have ended up as mediocre as his teammates. Kakashi mused with some helplessness. Jiraiya could teach the fourth Hokage the techniques of Mount Myabaku, providing him with many useful jutsus. Besides the Chidori, I don't seem to have much to offer Yorua. My summoning beasts don't interest him either, which is quite troubling. Kakashi thought, I should start paying attention to the information about the three great sage regions. With Yorua's current strength, only the summoning beasts from those places could be of help to him. If Sakura and Sasuke knew what Kakashi was thinking, they might feel utterly defeated. Sakura had just accused Kakashi of favoritism, and here he was contemplating such things for Yorua. If Yorua and Kakashi didn't look so different, Sakura and Sasuke might have suspected a father-son relationship. Even then, such a relationship might not be this close. Regardless, Kakashi was now determined to find information on the three great sage regions, intending to present it as a birthday gift for Yorua's next birthday. Kakashi's motivation wasn't just because Yorua was his chosen disciple, but also because Yorua was strong enough and posed no threat to Hidden Leaf Village. In Kakashi's eyes, Yorua was destined to become a hero of Hidden Leaf Village, much like Minato no Mikaze. Of course, he didn't wish for Yorua to meet the same fate as the fourth Hokage, sealing the Nine Tails and dying. Instead, he hoped Yorua would become a protector of Hidden Leaf Village, a pillar of strength for the village. From the beginning, Kakashi had high expectations for Yorua. In a flash, Kakashi's mind raced through these thoughts. Watching Yorua waving at them from a distance, Kakashi smiled and said, "Let's go see how Yorua is doing." With that, he disappeared from sight, leaving Sakura and Sasuke with expressions of helplessness. He was indeed eager to see how well Yorua had repaired Naruto's sealing technique. Sakura, looking at the now empty spot, could only sigh. Kakashi-sensei, honestly, he only focuses on Yorua. We're his students, not Yorua's team. Sasuke remained silent, but he too felt some annoyance at Kakashi's actions. Of course, it was just annoyance. Sasuke actually had a good impression of Yorua. After all these years, Yorua was the only one who would patiently tell him things he didn't know before. Still, no matter how much he liked Yorua, being a young man, he couldn't help but feel a bit disgruntled. Chapter 95. When Kakashi entered the room, he saw Naruto lying there unconscious. Yorua, who had previously looked pale, now seemed to have regained his normal complexion, no longer appearing as sickly as before. "How is it? Are you alright?" Kakashi was more concerned about Yorua's safety. Yorua glanced at Naruto and smiled. "I'm fine, it was a success. Oh, by the way, I thought the fourth Hokage's sealing technique wasn't sufficient, so I added an 8-trigram seal to Naruto. From now on, unless Naruto actively requests it, the Nine Tails won't have a chance to make him lose control." Kakashi was taken aback. "So, were you in such bad shape earlier because of the sealing technique?" Yorua shook his head. "No, I was attacked by the Nine Tails in Naruto's sealing space. Fortunately, it was still willing to communicate and didn't attack again." Kakashi was bewildered. "You communicated with the Nine Tails?" In Kakashi's mind, the Nine Tails was a natural disaster, a demon beast. How could it possibly communicate with humans? Kakashi thought this way because he didn't understand tailed beasts well and viewed them as mere weapons. Yorua nodded. "Yes, the Nine Tails is a tailed beast, and tailed beasts inherently possess intelligence, sometimes even surpassing humans, so communication is possible. I initially planned to negotiate with it to acknowledge Naruto and assist him in his growth, but it refused." Yorua felt it was a pity. Kakashi, on the other hand, looked at Yorua with a twitching mouth. In all his years, it was the first time he had seen someone try to negotiate such matters with a tailed beast. Kakashi was unaware of Killer Bee's existence and didn't know about perfect Jinchuriki. Naturally, he didn't know that Jinchuriki could coexist peacefully with tailed beasts. Thus, when he heard Yorua's words, it sounded like a myth to him. Of course, he wouldn't doubt Yorua. He just couldn't imagine how Yorua dared to communicate with the Nine Tails. To even think of asking the Nine Tails to assist Naruto, wasn't that a fool's dream? It's a wonder the Nine Tails didn't kill Yorua, that alone shows it was willing to communicate. Thinking back, Kakashi still felt a bit scared. "You're too reckless, that's the Nine Tails we're talking about. Just sealing it is difficult enough, and you dared to make such requests. You're lucky to be alive." Yorua chuckled. "No need to be so tense, Kakashi-sensei. Initially, the Nine Tails was hard to communicate with, but after a long conversation, I realized that its hatred towards humans and its fierce demeanor were due to being sealed within Jinchuriki for so long, which led to its resentment towards humans. With proper communication, it can accept certain viewpoints. Although it refused to assist Naruto, it agreed not to tempt Naruto into using its chakra. At least this reduces the chances of Naruto losing control in the future. Although my new sealing technique can completely seal the Nine Tails, if Naruto actively seeks its power, the seal won't be able to stop it. You can imagine that if Naruto is ever outmatched in battle, he will certainly seek power from the Nine Tails. However, without fully mastering the Nine Tails chakra, using it excessively can cause significant harm to his body. It will shorten his lifespan. So my advice is, until he has completely mastered the Nine Tails chakra, he should avoid using it if possible. Hearing Yorua say this, Kakashi was completely taken aback. He never expected Yorua could communicate with the Nine Tails like this, and the key point was that the Nine Tails actually agreed. Looking at Yorua, Kakashi didn't know whether to be pleased that his student was so capable or worried that Yorua was too daring. He had seen Yorua's pale face just now. Yorua had even coughed up blood, which was the first time Kakashi had seen him in such a dire state. Previously, when Yorua was training with the Chidori and had his chakra drained, he had only fainted, not been in such a critical condition. But just now, Yorua had almost died. Kakashi was silent for a long time before he finally said, "Don't do such risky things again in the future. Your safety is the most important." Yorua looked at Kakashi's serious expression and understood what he was worried about. He didn't argue, just nodded. After speaking with Yorua, Kakashi went over to Naruto's side and looked at the already altered sealing technique. Kakashi could sense the powerful chakra waves from the sealing technique. It's indeed different from the fourth Hokage's sealing technique. How can it be different when it's the same sealing technique? Kakashi asked Yorua. Yorua explained, because my chakra is a bit different from ordinary chakra, which makes it different from the fourth Hokage's. However, I've enhanced the sealing effect of this technique. The fourth Hokage's 8 trigram seal actually left a large gap. I understand the fourth Hokage's intention. He wanted to use that gap to continuously convert a portion of the Nine Tails chakra into Naruto's own chakra. That's why Naruto's chakra is so vast. In reality, without the sealing technique left by the fourth Hokage to convert part of the Nine Tails chakra into Naruto's chakra wouldn't be so vast. It wouldn't even be as much as Kakashi's, at least not as much as it is now. But with the portion of the Nine Tails chakra being converted, Naruto's chakra is now more than twice Kakashi's. In a few years, it will be 4 times Kakashi's. Of course, Kakashi's own chakra is also very large, if it weren't for the continuous consumption by his Sharingan that he can't turn off. Kakashi nodded. He had previously noticed something unusual about the amount of chakra Naruto had. It was clear that the Nine Tails chakra accounted for the majority of the chakra within Naruto. If Naruto relied solely on his own chakra, like during the Chunin exams, he wouldn't be able to summon Gamabunda. In the end, he needed the Nine Tails chakra to summon Gamabunda. The summoning jutsu is just a C-rank jutsu, but the stronger the summon creature, the more chakra is required. Even Sakura and Tsunade together, using the strength of 100 jutsu in the summoning jutsu, could only summon a tenth of Katsu's body from the Shikatsu forest, showing that the larger and stronger the summon creature, the more chakra is needed. During the Chunin exams, Naruto couldn't summon Gamabunda without using the Nine Tails chakra. This shows that Naruto's own chakra at that time wasn't particularly vast. It was stronger than his peers but definitely not more than Kakashi, an elite Jonin. Of course, with the Nine Tails chakra converted over the years through the 8 trigram seal, Naruto's chakra now could be about twice as much as Kakashi's. Kakashi had always been puzzled about why Naruto, at such a young age, had so much chakra. Even with the Uzumaki clan's bloodline, it shouldn't be that exaggerated. Moreover, Naruto only has half of the Uzumaki clan's bloodline. Now, with Yorua's explanation, he understood. Chapter 96. Yorua's voice remained calm, but his expression was serious. Right now, Naruto has 2 8 trigram seals inside him. He looked over at Kakashi and continued, the original seal, placed by the 4th Hokage, mainly functions to convert the Nine Tails chakra into a form Naruto can use. It's ingenious. But unstable. Kakashi raised an eyebrow. Yorua elaborated, even with reinforcement, the seal loosens each time Naruto draws on the Nine Tails power. If this continues unchecked, I'd have to constantly stabilize it. That kind of maintenance is exhausting. He took a breath, then added, so, I created a secondary seal. Another 8 trigram seal. Its core function is to suppress the Nine Tails from actively transmitting chakra to Naruto. This seal doesn't leave gaps. Its strength is significantly higher than the original. Unless Naruto breaks it himself, the Nine Tails won't be able to influence him. Kakashi folded his arms, listening carefully as Yorua continued. The 4th Hokage's seal still converts the chakra. Mine just ensures the beast stays sealed. The two work in tandem. As long as Naruto doesn't willingly tamper with them, the Nine Tails can't force its way out. Kakashi gave a slow nod. That's impressive. I could feel the chakra density from the seal the moment I stepped in. It's incredibly well made. Yoru nodded modestly. I used all of my chakra when I placed it. That's why it's so strong. Kakashi's eyes narrowed. You used all your chakra? Yoru scratched the back of his head with a sheepish grin. Well, yeah. But look, I recovered, didn't I? Kakashi's jaw clenched slightly. Why do you keep doing this to yourself? His voice carried both frustration and worry. You know what happens when a ninja drains all their chakra. The image of pain and the aftermath of his own battle flashed through Kakashi's mind. He remembered the feeling, his chakra fading into nothing after using Kamyu to save Choji. It had killed him. Brought him to the edge of death. And yet here Yoru stood, as reckless as ever. I don't want to see you collapse one day and never get back up. Kakashi muttered. Yoru's smile softened. But I'm okay now. My recovery speed is decent, right? That's not the point. Kakashi's voice turned stern. Yoru, let me give you some advice as your sensei. Never use your chakra recklessly in battle. Learn to calculate your limits. If your reserves fall too low, retreat. Regroup. Sometimes abandoning the mission is the smartest decision. This wasn't the shinobi code. The code said complete the mission at all costs. But Kakashi had long since stopped clinging to that blind idealism. Yoru didn't argue. He only nodded quietly. I understand, Kakashi-sensei. Kakashi placed a hand on his shoulder, firm and steady. You've done more than enough for Naruto. But I don't want you dying over a mistake. Neither I nor Tenten would forgive ourselves if something happened to you. His voice grew softer. A genius who lives to grow is the one who makes a real difference. One who dies early is just a name carved on a stone. Yoru lowered his gaze and nodded again. He understood. As they entered the medical ward, the faint scent of disinfectant in the air, Sakura rushed forward. Naruto lay unconscious on the bed, his breathing steady but shallow. Yoru. Kakashi-sensei. Sakura cried, her voice full of worry. Is Naruto okay? He's fine. Yoru assured her. He just fainted. A sudden burst of the Nine Tails chakra overwhelmed his system. But he'll be alright. Sasuke stood beside the bed, arms crossed, his brow furrowed. His gaze shifted to Yoru. So. You finished it? Yoru nodded. The sealing is complete. Sasuke scoffed quietly. Guess your seal worked. If this idiot goes berserk again, there's finally a leash on him. His tone was cold as usual, but not malicious. It was just Sasuke being Sasuke. Yoru chuckled, brushing off the attitude. Then you'd better keep training your Sharingan. If the Nine Tails ever breaks loose, someone will need to keep him in check. Sasuke paused, caught off guard by the remark. Humphrey. Who says I'll be strong enough? The words came out cold, but the insecurity beneath them was clear. Yoru had shown time and time again just how far ahead he was. And Sasuke couldn't ignore it anymore. They were the same age, yet Yoru already stood in a place Sasuke hadn't even imagined reaching. It made him wonder, could he even surpass his brother? Could he surpass Itachi? It was a bitter thought. But Yoru knew better than to taunt. He gave Sasuke a soft smile. What, don't tell me you're losing confidence. Sasuke shot him a glare. I will surpass you. Yoru grinned. Then I'll be waiting. But make sure to fully awaken your Sharingan first, at least catch up to Kakashi-sensei. Sasuke's gaze shifted to Kakashi, a flicker of eagerness appearing in his eyes. Kakashi sighed inwardly. He could already tell Sasuke would start hounding him after this. But that was fine. It was his responsibility. He had intended to pour his energy into Yoru's development. But in just under 2 months, Yoru had absorbed everything Kakashi had to offer, mastering all his jutsu save for the Sharingan itself. There was nothing more to teach him. Now it was time to guide the rest. Kakashi looked at Sasuke and nodded. Alright. I'll teach you how to handle your Sharingan. You've reached the 2 Tomoe stage already, haven't you? Sasuke nodded. My left eye has 2 Tomoe. The right one still has 1. Not bad. Kakashi said with a slight smile. At your age, that's exceptional. Obito reached that stage around 13. What Kakashi didn't know was that in the same year, Obito had awakened the Mangekyo. But the Sharingan wasn't always about age. Madara had awakened his at 15, while Sasuke awakened his first Tomoe at just 6, Tomoe being the only gift his childhood ever gave him. Back then, that 1 Tomoe had been a limit of his body's endurance. Now, one eye had 2 Tomoe. The other had 1. And it had all awakened when he watched Naruto collapse, unable to move, nearly consumed by the Nine Tails rage. That was the kind of bond and trauma the Sharingan fed on. And it was only the beginning. Chapter 97. After receiving Kakashi's promise, Sasuke didn't say anything further. A week later, the Great Bridge of the Land of Waves was finally completed. Originally, Tazuna wanted to name the bridge Yoruba Bridge. However, Yoruba refused. Tazuna then named it Hope Bridge instead. Yoruba naturally didn't want his name to become too prominent at this time. There was no benefit in standing out, so he let it go without resistance. After spending over a month in the Land of Waves, they finally completed their mission. What was originally just a C-rank task had unexpectedly escalated to a B-rank mission. Of course, for Yoruba, this mission was immensely beneficial. In just over a month, his strength had skyrocketed from Genin to Kage level. Now, his power had even surpassed Kakashi's, at least, according to Kakashi himself. Yoruba, however, remained conservative in his own assessment. He felt his strength was just barely at the Jonin level. He believed his combat experience still lagged behind that of a true Jonin. It was only through his immense chakra reserves and his mastery of various practical jutsu that he could even stand on that level. Yet even so, it was hard for him to believe that someone merely at the Jonin level could kill an elite Jonin in such a short time, especially one of the 7 ninja swordsmen of the mist. He had also unleashed a jutsu spanning several hundred meters, capable of suppressing Naruto in his two-tail state. Yoruba had always been cautious when evaluating his abilities. Perhaps it was because he knew the outcome of Kaguya Otsutsuki during the 4th Shinobi World War, which made him extremely careful. The lesson from Kaguya was too significant, he had to be prudent. After returning to Hidden Leaf Village, the group headed to the Hokage's office to submit their mission report. Since Yoruba had participated in the mission, he naturally needed to be there. Inside the Hokage's office, the 3rd Hokage looked at the 5 people standing before him, his gaze especially lingering on Yoruba. This was the first formal meeting between Yoruba and the 3rd. Before this, the Hokage hadn't paid much attention to him. Even after hearing of him, he'd had no real opportunity to meet him face to face. After Kakashi reported the general details of the mission, the 3rd Hokage nodded. This mission is considered a B-rank mission. Well done. Missions above A rank had to be issued by a nation, so even though an elite Jonin had participated, the mission could only be classified as B rank, since it was personally commissioned by Tazuna. After chatting for a bit, the 3rd said, Kakashi, Yoruba, you two stay behind. The rest of you may go undressed. Kakashi frowned slightly. Yoruba, however, didn't react. Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura simply assumed the Hokage was keeping them back for commendation. After all, Kakashi and Yoruba had performed the most outstandingly during this mission, especially Yoruba. This aligned with the image they held of the 3rd Hokage. Even Sasuke, despite his increasingly aloof nature after the Uchiha massacre, had a favorable impression of the 3rd. The 3rd had indeed taken good care of him, whether due to his own judgment or Itachi Uchiha's request, Sasuke didn't know. But he had no objections. Naruto and Sakura were even less likely to question the Hokage's intentions. As they left, Naruto glanced at Yoruba with envy and silently vowed, I will definitely surpass Yoruba. Even though Naruto often pulled pranks on the Hokage, in his heart, he genuinely viewed him as a grandfather. Naturally, he longed to receive his praise. After Naruto, Sasuke, and the others left, only the 3rd, Yoruba, and Kakashi remained in the office. After a moment of silence, the 3rd finally said, Kakashi, tell me the details of this mission. Kakashi sighed inwardly. He had intentionally provided only a rough overview of the mission earlier, not wanting the 3rd to delve too deeply. But with Naruto and the others present, he couldn't fabricate too much, so he had kept it very brief. That was the biggest issue, the 3rd was an old fox. He could immediately sense that something was being concealed. Yoruba also noticed the shift in atmosphere. Fortunately, he understood the 3rd well enough not to worry. Still, it was clear that what happened in the Land of Waves couldn't be kept hidden. Of course, Yoruba had never planned to hide it. He was a Hidden Leaf Village ninja and had no clan scheming in the background. The 3rd wouldn't harbor ill intentions toward him. But Yoruba also didn't want the Hokage to know the full extent of his strength. After all, with great power came great responsibility, and burden. If the 3rd saw him as a powerhouse, he might treat him as a workhorse. It was important to remember, Yoruba was still a Genin. Even if he took on higher-level missions, the compensation was still at Genin level. Kakashi considered the situation. He certainly didn't want to expose Yoruba's capabilities. But the mission had involved not only him and Yoruba, but also Sasuke and the others. If what he said conflicted with what the Genin reported later, it would only create more trouble for Yoruba. Kakashi glanced at Yoruba. Left with no other choice, he began recounting the mission in detail. At first, the 3rd Hokage remained calm. But as he listened, he gradually became more and more astonished. Yoru had killed an elite Jonin, one of the 7 ninja swordsmen of the mist, Kusagakure. He had even managed to suppress Naruto while he was in a rampaging two-tailed state. The third Hokage was very familiar with the 7 ninja swordsmen. They were a fearsome force from the hidden mist, once infamous during the Third Shinobi World War. Even though Might Dewey had taken down several of them, it had cost him his life. To take one of them down in ordinary combat, Kakashi himself wouldn't dare claim he could do it easily. What did that imply? It meant that Yoru's current strength might already be at the level of an elite Jonin. How long has it even been? After Kakashi finished his report, the third looked at Yoru seriously. Yoru, it seems being a genin is no longer suitable for you. Yoru was momentarily stunned. He didn't quite know what the third meant. Was he going to be promoted? But he'd only completed a handful of missions, all of which were D rank or C rank before this one. Seeing his confusion, the third Hokage smiled. With your strength and abilities, it's time to promote you to Chunin. Kakashi, standing to the side, couldn't help but feel pleased. It wasn't just because Yoru was being promoted. Once Yoru became a Chunin, Kakashi could take him on missions outside the village without drawing suspicion. After all, a Chunin was no longer considered a ninja apprentice. They were independent shinobi, no longer required to act under the constant supervision of a Jonin instructor. They could be dispatched directly by a Jonin at any time. With Kakashi's status, arranging for Yoru to join missions would seem completely normal. Before, it might have raised questions. After all, Kakashi wasn't even Yoru's official instructor. But once Yoru became a Chunin, that barrier would be removed entirely. From then on, he could move freely. And Kakashi could guide him without constraints. Chapter 98. Before Yoru could react, Kakashi chuckled and said, I also think Yoru should be promoted to Chunin. Not all Chunin need to go through the Chunin exams. In fact, most Chunin and Jonin in the major ninja villages are promoted without taking the exams. After all, considering the elimination mechanism of the Chunin exams, it would have been impossible to field so many ninjas during the Fourth Shinobi World War. Therefore, many Chunin and Jonin are promoted based on the number of missions completed and their corresponding strength. Of course, Yoru has only completed a few missions, all of which were low level. Even counting the Land of Waves mission, he had only done one B rank mission. In terms of mission count, he didn't meet the usual requirements. However, the Hokage holds the authority to directly promote a ninja to Chunin or even Jonin. As the most powerful ninja in the village, the Hokage naturally has the best judgment of a ninja's strength. Therefore, the Chunin and Jonin promoted by the Hokage usually have unquestionable ability. More importantly, being directly promoted by the Hokage is a form of recognition and an undeniable honor. It also signals to other factions that the Hokage himself stands behind you. Minato Namikaze was the best example. As a civilian ninja, he married Uzumaki Kushina, became a disciple of Jiraiya, and was selected by the third Hokage to become the fourth Hokage. Besides his overwhelming talent, Minato's political alignment was clear. He was part of the third Hokage's faction. Of course, neither Yoru nor Kakashi cared about this. Yoru didn't concern himself with who saw him as their own. And Kakashi had long accepted his identity as part of the third Hokage's faction. Being Minato's disciple meant that from the very beginning, Kakashi was aligned with the third. So naturally, he supported the third Hokage's decision to bring Yoru under his wing. Originally, the third Hokage had intended to cultivate Yoru as the second Minato Namikaze. After all, Yoru had exceptional talent, a clean background, and was Kakashi's disciple, just like Minato once was. But Yoru's growth had already far surpassed his expectations. Now, the third Hokage was struggling to determine how best to position Yoru. After much thought, he decided to promote Yoru to Chunin. This way, he could begin involving him in Hidden Leaf Village's inner workings. The third Hokage was already in his 60s. By the time Yoru turned 20, he would be well into his 70s. Even if he didn't want to retire by then, his body wouldn't allow him to continue. He didn't possess the robust physique of the Senju clan. No matter how powerful he had once been, age had significantly diminished his strength. In fact, he had considered stepping down before. But there simply wasn't a suitable successor. Jiraiya had always been unwilling, and his carefree nature wasn't fitting for the position. Tsunade had her own problems. Originally, Orochimaru was the ideal candidate, but after selecting Minato instead, Orochimaru had been cast aside, and eventually defected. Danzō. That was unthinkable. Not only was he nearly the same age, but the third Hokage could never entrust Hidden Leaf Village to someone with such extreme ideologies. As for the two advisors, they were out of the question. If they hadn't been disciples of the second Hokage, they wouldn't even qualify as advisors. Their strength simply wasn't enough. The only somewhat plausible candidate left was Kakashi. However, after his decline in strength, Kakashi hadn't improved much. His experience was limited, and without overwhelming strength to back him, it was difficult to command respect. That was the dilemma the third Hokage faced. Even if he wanted to retire, he had no one to pass the torch to. But now, after seeing Yorua, he felt as though he were looking at a young Minato no Mikaze. Of course, Yorua's experience was still far too shallow, far less than Kakashi's. Since experience couldn't be built in a short time, the only way forward was to make his strength so absolute that no one could question it. The first step was to raise Yorua's ninja rank and involve him in village matters. Yorua had no idea what the third Hokage was planning. He merely assumed the old man wanted to put him to work sooner. That said, he was rather pleased. He had originally planned to increase his ninja rank so he could take on higher-level missions, earn more money, and gain more combat experience. If the third Hokage knew that Yorua was only thinking about money, he might have coughed up blood in frustration. After carefully calculating how to nurture Yorua into a future Hokage, this kid was just focused on payday. Yorua was momentarily stunned and noticed the third Hokage looking at him. But I've only completed a few missions. I shouldn't be qualified to become a Chunin, right? Yorua asked. The third Hokage smiled and said, indeed. But you already possess the leadership skills and strength required of a Chunin. Naturally, you can be promoted. Yorua didn't question it further and nodded. Thank you, Lord Hokage. Seeing Yorua accept the promotion so easily, the third Hokage was very satisfied. Why thank me? You should have been promoted a long time ago. If it weren't for the fact that you only graduated from the Ninja Academy less than a year ago, you'd already be a Jonin. Yorua waved his hands quickly. That's too much. Becoming a Chunin is already a big deal. The third Hokage looked at Kakashi and said, your teacher became a Chunin at 6 years old. You should learn from him. Kakashi quickly responded, that was during wartime. The circumstances were special. But only you managed to do it. Both you and your teacher possess outstanding ninja talent. I'm very reassured having Kakashi teach you. The future of Hidden Leaf Village will depend on you. After the third Hokage finished speaking, Yorua felt a bit awkward. Those words felt far too heavy. He thought the Hokage was just being polite, but now it felt excessive. Yorua replied, Lord Hokage, you're exaggerating. I'm just doing my part. Yorua was completely sincere. After becoming a Chunin, he simply intended to do his job well, earn what he could, and live the life he wanted. He had no interest in getting involved in Hidden Leaf Village's deeper affairs. However, Kakashi knew that the third Hokage wouldn't let Yorua stay uninvolved. He had already picked up on the meaning behind the old man's words. While Kakashi was glad, he also couldn't help but worry. Yorua was still too young. Getting involved in high-level politics so early wouldn't necessarily benefit him. Even Kakashi himself didn't enjoy participating in those matters. But he also understood, Yorua was no longer just some ordinary Genin. He had fully caught the attention of the third Hokage. In Kakashi's eyes, Yorua's strength had already reached the level of a Hokage. Even if Yorua didn't want to get involved, there would be no avoiding it. Kakashi sighed internally. Looks like I'll have to get involved too. In the past, Kakashi had every reason to stay out of Hidden Leaf Village's internal power struggles. But now that Yorua had been drawn into the third Hokage's sphere, Kakashi had no choice but to follow. Chapter 99 The third Hokage smiled, deciding not to dwell on those matters any longer. Instead, he seemed to have thought of something else and asked, Kakashi has taught you many techniques, have you mastered them all? Yorua wasn't quite sure what the third Hokage meant by this, but he didn't hide anything. Yes, I've mastered them all. It seems Kakashi might not have many more techniques to teach you. Although he knows a lot of ninjutsu, most are fairly standard. There might not be many that are particularly useful to you. In the future, if you want to learn new techniques, you can go to the archives. You'll find all of Hidden Leaf Village's technique records there, including some forbidden ones. Kakashi was stunned. He hadn't expected the third Hokage to be so generous. Yorua might not have understood the true weight of what the archives represented. The archives were where all of Hidden Leaf Village's sealed records were stored, not just jutsu, but historical documents, secret intel, and information both dark and light. Even Kakashi couldn't freely access them. When he had once tried to look up information on wood style, he had to sneak in, and was caught by the third Hokage. Only afterward was he granted access, and even then, it was limited to Hidden Leaf Village's research on the subject. Entry to the archives was restricted to those the Hokage trusted deeply, individuals in high positions. Even the scroll of seals was stored there. This meant the third Hokage completely trusted Yorua. But it also meant that Yorua was now clearly aligned with the Hokage's faction. Yoru was quite pleased. He was genuinely interested in many of Hidden Leaf Village's techniques, the Flying Thunder God Jutsu, wood style, various sealing techniques, especially those of the Uzumaki clan. So Yoru smiled and said, "Thank you, Lord Hokage." The third Hokage nodded. Kakashi's expression, however, was complicated. After chatting with the third Hokage for a while, Kakashi led Yoru out of the office. Yoru's records had been updated. He was now officially a Chunin. The change came so suddenly that even Yoru found it hard to believe. Although confident in his abilities, he hadn't expected to become a Chunin at such a young age. This meant higher pay, and more combat opportunities. But Kakashi didn't seem to be smiling. Yoru noticed. "Kakashi-sensei, aren't you happy?" As they walked down the street, Kakashi glanced at him. "I am happy. But do you know why the Hokage promoted you?" Yoru chuckled, hands in his pockets, seemingly unconcerned. "I might have an idea, but I don't really care." Kakashi paused. Looking at Yoru's calm smile, he seemed to understand something, and smiled, too. "You're right. There's no need to worry. No matter what, I'll be with you every step of the way." But Yoru didn't actually understand the third Hokage's true intentions. He thought the Hokage simply wanted to make use of him earlier. He didn't know the Hokage intended to groom him, even considering bypassing Kakashi to have him succeed as the fifth Hokage, just like Minato Namikaze back in the day. If Yoru hadn't displayed such strength during the Land of Waves mission, the third Hokage would have taken his time. Kakashi, with his experience and position, would have been a more natural candidate. But the strength Yoru had shown changed everything. It was just like back then, when the Hokage had originally wanted Orochimaru as his successor. But then Minato Namikaze appeared. And Orochimaru's actions crossed the line. So the Hokage chose Minato. Minato was, after all, his student's student, his grand disciple. Now, he was preparing to do the same. In his eyes, Yoru's potential was even greater than Minato's. Minato had been a genius, but Yoru was something else. Yoru's talent wasn't like Minato's. It resembled the first Hokage, Hashirama Senju. The third Hokage had already confirmed it. Yoru possessed the sage body. Kakashi's next words left Yoru a little speechless. He had assumed Kakashi was talking about taking him along for future missions outside the village. With a hint of resentment, he muttered, "Kakashi-sensei. There's no teacher who exploits their student like this, right?" Kakashi was stunned. He suspected Yoru hadn't understood the full meaning of his earlier words. So he asked, "Do you know what the third Hokage's words mean?" "Of course. Isn't it just promoting me to Chunin so I can work harder for the village? I've been prepared for that all along." Kakashi's mouth twitched slightly. He was now certain, Yoru hadn't understood the implications of the promotion. Or what Kakashi himself had meant. Helplessly, Kakashi began to explain. "The third Hokage didn't promote you just to give you tasks. This is his way of declaring to the village where you stand, and who you stand with. Giving you access to the archives is a sign of deep trust. Even I need the Hokage's approval to enter." Yoru frowned. Kakashi misread the expression. Given what he knew of Yoru, he assumed he didn't like getting involved in these kinds of power struggles. Just as Kakashi was about to explain the upside of playing along, Yoru spoke. "Whatever. Any faction's fine. I'll just do what I'm required to. I don't want to, and can't, handle anything more." Kakashi looked at him, slightly surprised. "So you don't mind the Hokage making such a unilateral decision?" Yoru smiled. "What's strange about it? He's the Hokage. He naturally has that authority. Besides, it doesn't hurt me. So why blame him?" Kakashi smiled, too. "It's good that you think that way. Now that you're a Chunin, when I need your help in the future, it'll be legitimate. Even Sensei can't object." "If Sensei knew you said that," Yoru replied lightly, "he probably wouldn't be too happy." "He won't be. He'll just be happy knowing you're a Chunin." Kakashi smiled as he spoke. The two continued down the street. Before long, they ran into Naruto and his team heading toward Karakuramen. "Kakashi-sensei. Yoru. You finally came out." Naruto waved at them, smiling brightly. Sasuke and Sakura followed behind. Yoru glanced at Kakashi and smiled. "Kakashi-sensei, looks like you're treating us today." Kakashi sighed. Sigh. He had been planning to buy one of Jiraiya's novels later. But Naruto liked ramen. If he liked barbecue, Kakashi's wallet would have been in real danger. The two arrived in front of a kairaku. Naruto grinned. "Kakashi-sensei, Yoru, did you know we were coming here?" Kakashi stayed silent. Yoru answered, "Yeah." Kakashi said he's treating. Hearing that, Naruto's eyes lit up. "Long live Kakashi-sensei." Kakashi looked at Yorua, his mouth twitching slightly. When did I say that? Although deep down, he knew. He was going to pay for this meal. Sasuke watched Yorua quietly, wondering what had happened inside the Hokage's office. Sakura was curious too. Chapter 100. After everyone sat down, Naruto looked at Kakashi and asked, Kakashi-sensei, what did the third Hokage want with you? Sasuke and Sakura also turned their attention to him, curious to know. Yorua sat quietly next to Kakashi, not saying a word. Kakashi, of course, couldn't disclose the details of his conversation with the third Hokage. He simply replied, he just asked about the details of the mission, and because Yorua performed exceptionally well, he's been promoted to Chunin starting today. Who was preparing ramen for everyone, paused in surprise. She turned to Yorua with a delighted expression. Really? Yorua, have you really become a Chunin? Yorua smiled and said, yeah, I got lucky. Tuki, who was nearby, also expressed his happiness. I knew it. I've always said that Yorua is outstanding and would achieve great things in the future. With a generous spirit, Tuki announced, to celebrate your promotion to Chunin, everyone's meal is on the house today. Yorua quickly responded, Uncle Tuki, that's not necessary. Tuki waved his hand dismissively, nonsense, this is a great occasion worth celebrating. Seeing Tuki's joyful demeanor, Yorua couldn't refuse any further and agreed. Due to Yorua's frequent visits for ramen, he had developed a good relationship with Tuki and Ayam. Hearing the news, Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura were all stunned. They looked at Yorua in disbelief. Yorua, have you really become a Chunin? Sakura asked, unable to believe it. Yorua nodded, I suppose so, that's what the third Hokage said. Naruto, feeling disgruntled, exclaimed, why is Yorua the only one who gets to become a Chunin? I perform really well too, so why not me? The third Hokage must be getting senile. Though he wasn't jealous, Naruto felt that Yorua deserved to be a Chunin long ago, yet he couldn't help but feel envious. Sasuke frowned slightly. Although he wasn't overly eager to become a Chunin, seeing Yorua achieve it still stirred some jealousy in him. It was unavoidable. After all, Yorua was his classmate, and they had just completed the same mission. Yorua being personally promoted to Chunin by the third Hokage was a treatment that made Sasuke envious, even a bit jealous. Kakashi said, Naruto, if you want to become a Chunin, you'll have to work even harder, maybe even surpass Yorua. Naruto stared intently at Yorua, still not understanding why Yorua could become a Chunin. Although Yorua was indeed strong, wasn't becoming a Chunin supposed to require completing many missions? Yorua had only completed 2D rank missions and 1 C rank mission. Naruto, on the other hand, had completed 3D rank missions and 1 C rank mission. Even though the third Hokage said the mission in the Land of Waves was a B rank mission, it hadn't been officially changed in the records. So, that mission was still considered a C rank mission. Sasuke looked at Yorua, feeling jealous but also acknowledging Yorua's strength. Idiot, don't forget who saved you when you were in trouble. Despite his jealousy, Sasuke defended Yorua, as he greatly respected Yorua's abilities. Sakura chimed in, yeah, do you really think Yorua doesn't deserve to be a Chunin? Naruto pouted in grievance, when did I ever say he didn't deserve it? It's just that he's only completed a few missions. Why did the third Hokage let him become a Chunin? Naruto was still not convinced. Kakashi patted Naruto on the shoulder and said earnestly, if you're envious, then surpass him. Don't be so lackadaisical all the time. Do you really think your talent is inferior to Yorua's? Although Kakashi internally believed it might be true, he was trying to motivate Naruto, so he could only say that. Naruto fell for it, clenching his fist towards Yorua and declaring, Yorua, it won't be long before I become a Chunin too. Even though you became one a few days before me, I'll definitely become a Jonin before you. You better not slack off, because I'll surpass you soon. Yorua naturally didn't argue, smiling as he replied, I'll be waiting for that day. After Yorua said this, Naruto had a look of determination, laughing heartily, ha ha ha. That day will come soon. Meanwhile, Sakura and Sasuke stood to the side, looking at him speechlessly. They could clearly see that Kakashi and Yorua were just humoring Naruto. Neither of them believed Naruto could surpass Yorua. Even someone as proud as Sasuke, after witnessing Yorua's strength recently, had no confidence that he could surpass Yorua in the future. Sasuke thought it would be good enough if he could just catch up to Yorua. Sasuke even believed that once he caught up to Yorua, he would definitely be able to defeat Itachi Uchiha. In his view, Itachi Uchiha might not be stronger than Yorua. No, after their previous battles, he thought Yorua might even be stronger than Itachi Uchiha. However, seeing Naruto's confident demeanor, both chose to remain silent and didn't point it out. After a while, once they finished eating and were about to leave, Sasuke said, "Yorua, why don't you came to my house to train today?" Yorua, who was about to head home, was taken aback. Kakashi, Naruto, and Sakura were also surprised. The usually aloof Sasuke actually invited someone to his house? Even Yorua hadn't expected it. After a moment of surprise, Kakashi smiled. He was naturally pleased, as he had always hoped that his team of students could get along well with Yorua. Whether it was Naruto or Sasuke, their backgrounds were not simple. He hoped Yorua could become friends with them, which would be beneficial for Yorua in the future. One was the son of the fourth Hokage, and the other was the last of the Uchiha clan, now someone the third Hokage valued. If they became friends with Yorua, life in Hidden Leaf Village would be much easier for him. With Kakashi's support and the third Hokage's clear stance, as long as Yorua didn't do anything reckless, he wouldn't face much danger. Yorua looked at Sasuke's somewhat nervous expression and felt like laughing. He didn't expect Sasuke to act like this. However, he didn't refuse. Although they said they were going to Sasuke's house to train, it was more likely that Yorua would be helping Sasuke train. Sasuke didn't have anything to teach Yorua, nor did Yorua need anything from him. Of course, Yorua was also interested in the Uchiha clan's territory. He hadn't dared to go before, but now with Sasuke's invitation, it was a legitimate reason. So after thinking for a moment, Yorua agreed. Sure. At this point, Naruto jumped in. I want to go too. Are you guys planning to secretly train? I have to come along. Sasuke seemed reluctant to bring Naruto along. However, if he refused Naruto, Yorua might not go either. Sasuke had no choice but to say, do whatever you want. Sakura then timidly raised her hand, can I come too? Sasuke nodded. Since Naruto was going, he couldn't refuse Sakura. Kakashi was happy to see this development. However, he wouldn't join them. Leisurely, he said, I should have gone with you, but I need to rush to buy some books, so I can't join you. Yorua laughed. Kakashi-sensei, take it easy, don't overdo it. Kakashi's mouth twitched slightly. He knew Yorua must have read his books. Feeling a bit embarrassed, he said, well, you all train hard. I'll be off then. With that, he disappeared from their sight. Sasuke, Naruto, and Sakura were left bewildered. They didn't understand what Yorua's words meant earlier. Chapter 101. Yorua didn't feel like explaining anything. The group strolled leisurely towards the Uchiha clan's territory. After the Nine Tails incident, the Uchiha clan had been relocated to the outskirts of the village. Or rather, after the Nine Tails incident, the Uchiha clan's situation in Hidden Leaf Village became quite dire. Previously, although the Uchiha clan couldn't enter the core of the village's power, they at least controlled the Hidden Leaf Village military police force, a department with real authority. Moreover, they still enjoyed the status of a prestigious family in Hidden Leaf Village. Even though the Hidden Leaf Village military police force was originally established by the second Hokage to monitor the Uchiha clan, it eventually developed into a position of significant power for them. However, after the Nine Tails incident, many of the powers of the Hidden Leaf Village military police force were retracted, and even their territory was moved to the outskirts of the village. The Uchiha clan, being very proud, naturally wouldn't let such things happen without reacting. But due to the personality issues of the Uchiha clan members, they had poor relations with every other family in the village. Even if they wanted to unite with other clans to seize power in Hidden Leaf Village, they couldn't. The only option left was a coup. The awkward part was that there was a significant division within the Uchiha clan about whether to seize power through force. Not every member of the Uchiha clan was willing to use force to gain power. The final outcome was the annihilation of the Uchiha clan. Sasuke, of course, was unaware of this. He didn't know the truth behind the Uchiha clan's massacre, and after the clan's destruction, the village treated him very well. He was surrounded by praise, flattery, and people envious of his family background. As a result, although Sasuke was determined to become stronger to kill Itachi Uchiha, he held no resentment towards the village. Without the influence of his clan, many families in the village were actually quite interested in Sasuke. Ino, as the heir of the Yamanaka clan, was free to like Sasuke without interference from her family. This was because they actually supported Ino's interaction with Sasuke. After all, Sasuke was currently the only one in Hidden Leaf Village with Uchiha blood. Moreover, with no clan backing him, if Sasuke were to be with Ino, even the third Hokage wouldn't have any objections. Without the influence of a clan, even if Sasuke wanted to stir up trouble, how much impact could he really have? However, his Uchiha bloodline was coveted by many families. Not only was Orochimaru interested, but many families in the village were also envious. Coupled with Sasuke's own exceptional talent, he became even more popular. So, after his clan's destruction, Sasuke didn't suffer any grievances in Hidden Leaf Village. In fact, He lived much better than most children. Currently, Sasuke has a deep sense of belonging to Hidden Leaf Village. Of course, all of this is based on the premise that he doesn't know the truth about the Uchiha clan's massacre. If he knew, he probably wouldn't think this way. No matter how reasonable or forced the third Hokage's reasons were, the Uchiha clan's massacre was still related to him. However, the third Hokage likely wouldn't care, as he didn't know how powerful Sasuke would become in the future. Now that the Uchiha clan is gone, even if Sasuke wanted to do something to Hidden Leaf Village, he wouldn't have the capability. To put it bluntly, even if Sasuke becomes Hokage in the future and learns the truth of the past, what difference would it make? It was Itachi Uchiha who killed them, and at most, the third Hokage was guilty of indecision. Without the Uchiha clan's influence, could Sasuke have become Hokage without political wisdom? As someone in a high position, he naturally wouldn't be blinded by personal vendettas. Besides, the third Hokage didn't make any major mistakes. He could even shift the blame to Danzō, who was the one pushing hard for the annihilation of the Uchiha clan. But that was the third Hokage's thinking in the past. Now, he's decided to nurture Yorua, even planning to step down when Yorua turns 20 and has Hokage-level strength, allowing him to take over. By then, the third Hokage would be in his 70s. For a ninja, that's quite old. Even Onoki's body is failing at that age. If he had a strong enough successor, Onoki would have retired long ago. Of course, the third Hokage doesn't know that Yorua's strength has already reached the level of a Kage. Yorua himself feels his combat experience is lacking, far from reaching Kage level, thinking he's at best a Jonin. But what Jonin can easily kill Kiromaruga, an elite Jonin? What Jonin can make the Nine Tails marvel? Perhaps among all who know Yorua's true strength, only Yorua himself believes he's far from Kage level. The third Hokage's current plan is, if Yorua faces too much opposition due to his youth when he turns 20, to let Kakashi serve as the fifth Hokage temporarily. This would allow Yorua to gain more age and prestige before taking over, making the transition seamless. Yorua knows nothing of this, and neither does Kakashi. Yorua thinks the third Hokage wants to make him work like a horse early on, while Kakashi believes the third Hokage is grooming and winning over Yorua. Neither of them realizes that the third Hokage has already decided to pass his position to Yorua. When they headed to the Uchiha clan's grounds, Kakashi bought Jiraiya's latest novel and then went to Kiyotoichi's house. Fortunately, Kiyotoichi had no missions today. As Kakashi sat down, Kiyotoichi anxiously asked, "What's the deal with this mission? Why didn't you notify me before taking him out of the village?" After Yorua left, Kiyotoichi intended to call on him, only to be informed by the third Hokage that Yorua had been temporarily assigned to Kakashi's team for an out-of-village mission. He was gone for over a month, and during that time, Kiyotoichi was on edge, fearing it was a plot by the third Hokage against Yorua. Kakashi felt a bit awkward seeing Kiyotoichi so worried. After all, Yorua had become a Chunin, and the third Hokage clearly hoped Yorua would get involved in village affairs. In the future, he certainly wouldn't be able to follow Kiyotoichi on missions anymore. Kiyotoichi was Yorua's true teacher, but after only a few days, Yorua graduated from him. Kiyotoichi hadn't even had the chance to teach Yorua much ninjutsu before he had to leave. Kakashi felt somewhat guilty towards Kiyotoichi. If he hadn't taken Yorua, and Yorua hadn't caught the third Hokage's attention, Yorua might still be following Kiyotoichi on missions. Kakashi could see that Kiyotoichi valued Yorua greatly, even considering him a personal disciple, much like himself. Yet, Yorua hadn't spent much time with him. Kakashi remained silent for a long time, making Kiyotoichi nervous, fearing something had happened to Yorua. "Say something, what's happened to Yorua? You promised to protect him." Kiyotoichi's emotions got the better of him, shouting at Kakashi because his demeanor suggested something had happened to Yorua. Seeing Kiyotoichi so agitated, Kakashi's lips twitched slightly. He felt that what he was about to say would definitely anger Kiyotoichi. Chapter 102 Kakashi, with an awkward expression, said, "Don't get so worked up. Since I've returned safely, do you really think something could have happened to Yorua?" Kiyotoichi replied with a stern face, "Stop with the nonsense and tell me how Yorua is doing. You took him out of the village without informing me. Have you forgotten the promise you made to me before? You said you would only take him out on missions after he had the strength of a Jonin." Kiyotoichi was furious. Kakashi's unilateral decision had worried him for over a month. He had even considered leaving the village to search for them. However, the third Hokage had mentioned that this mission was only a C-rank task, so he decided to wait. Who knew that waiting would take over a month? Kakashi no longer concealed the truth and said, "I was left with no choice but to take him out of the village this time. I was concerned that leaving him in the village might pose a danger. If the higher-ups have any designs on him, Do you think you alone could stop them? I could only keep him by my side. Moreover, during this mission, he performed exceptionally well, and his strength has grown rapidly. If you knew his current abilities, you would definitely thank me." Despite Kakashi's words, Toichi couldn't feel happy. His expression remained as grim as before. He wouldn't be at ease until he saw Yoru himself. Seeing Toichi's expression, Kakashi was at a loss for words and could only continue. There was an unexpected turn in this mission. It was originally just a C-rank task, but the client deceived us, and it turned out to be a B-rank mission with enemy ninjas involved. Toichi furrowed his brows, deeply worried. After all, Yoru, despite his high talent, lacked real combat experience. Was he injured? Toichi asked anxiously. Kakashi chuckled. Injured? How could I possibly let him get hurt? Besides, with your disciple's current strength, it's really hard for ordinary ninjas to harm him. In Kakashi's view, Yoru already possessed Kage-level strength. Kage-level ninjas are rare even among the 5 great ninja villages, let alone outside them. Kakashi was unaware of the existence of the Akatsuki, not knowing that almost all of its members were Kage-level experts. But even within the Akatsuki, there weren't many members. Hearing Kakashi's words, Toichi breathed a sigh of relief. As long as he's not injured, that's good. Toichi was less concerned about how strong Yoru was and more about whether he was unharmed. After all, in his eyes, Yoru's talent was extremely high, and becoming strong was only natural. However, if he were injured, it could negatively impact his future development. Kakashi understood Toichi's concerns, as he shared the same sentiments regarding Yoru. After spending over a month together, he truly regarded Yoru as family. Kakashi pondered for a moment and said, however, hearing this, Toichi's heart tightened once again, nervously watching Kakashi, fearing he might say something negative about Yoru. Kakashi sighed, feeling a bit guilty, and said, however, he probably can't stay in your team anymore. Why? Toichi stood up in agitation upon hearing this. You want to take him away completely? I'm still his teacher. What are you planning to do? Toichi initially thought Kakashi wanted to snatch Yoru away. It wasn't that he wanted Yoru to remain his student forever, but he didn't want Yoru to follow Kakashi entirely. He was well aware of the kinds of missions Kakashi undertook. Previously, Kakashi had taken Yoru out of the village without notifying him, and he let it slide. He didn't want it to happen again. Kakashi looked up at Toichi and said helplessly, look at you getting all worked up. You were once an Anbu Jonin, how can you be so impatient? Toichi replied coldly, can I stay calm? If I stay calm any longer, I'll lose my student. Seeing Toichi so agitated, Kakashi quickly clarified, what I mean is, because Yoru completed the mission excellently this time, and the 3rd Hokage appreciates him, the 3rd Hokage has directly promoted him to Chunin. And he hopes Yoru will train with me. Kakashi added this last part himself. The 3rd Hokage hadn't actually said that. But even if he knew, the 3rd wouldn't deny it. Originally, Team 11 was an unexpected occurrence, and the 3rd didn't expect much development from this team. Who knew Yoru would emerge? It was because of Yoru that this team continued to exist. Without Yoru, Team 11 wouldn't have existed, the entire team would have failed the assessment and been sent back to the Ninja Academy for retraining. Kakashi initially thought Toichi would be very angry upon hearing this news. Unexpectedly, Toichi looked delighted. Really? Kakashi was a bit puzzled. You're not angry? Why would I be angry? My student has become a Chunin, that's a good thing. Toichi said with a smile. But he won't be able to stay in your team anymore, and he'll be training with me from now on. Kakashi emphasized. Toichi waved his hand, as long as he's safe, it's fine. Training with you is good too. I don't really have much more to teach him, with you, he can become even stronger. And at least it proves the 3rd Hokage has acknowledged him, so I don't have to worry about his safety anymore. Toichi considered this a good thing. As for whether Yoru could continue training with him in the future, he didn't mind. He just hoped Yoru could grow up safely and become a pillar of Hidden Leaf Village, a hero who would protect the village. Now that Yoru was steadily moving towards this goal, how could Toichi be angry? Kakashi hadn't expected Toichi to have such an attitude, but considering his hopes for Yoru, he understood. If it were him, he would feel the same as Toichi. Having figured it out, Kakashi said, during this mission, we encountered 2 rogue ninjas from the Hidden Mist Village, Zabuza Momoki and Rigakurasuki. Yoru's talent exceeded my expectations. Previously, I thought I had a good grasp of his abilities. But during the mission, his growth was like something out of a myth. Now his strength has surpassed mine. In this mission, he single-handedly killed Rigakurasuki, took down 4 Chunin, and subdued a berserk Naruto. If Zabuza hadn't fled quickly, he might have become another of Yorui's achievements. Kiyotoichi was stunned, staring blankly at Kakashi. If these words hadn't come from Kakashi, he would have thought it was someone telling a mythical tale. As a former Anbu Jonin, he naturally knew what kind of ninjas Zabuza and Rika were. They were both elite Jonin from the Hidden Mist Village, renowned in the ninja world. Moreover, they were part of the 7 Ninja Swordsmen, a title that struck fear into many ninjas. Yorua had actually killed one and scared off another. The most unbelievable part was that Yorua had subdued the berserk Naruto. He had seen Naruto go berserk before. At that time, the third Hokage had mobilized the entire Hidden Leaf Village Sealing Squad to suppress Naruto. The extreme malice of the Nine Tails, that terrifying chakra, was something he could hardly forget even now. Yet Yorua not only remained unharmed but also subdued the berserk Naruto. It sounded utterly fantastical. Chapter 103. Kiyotoichi remained silent for a long time before asking, somewhat trembling, "What you said, is it true?" Kakashi replied calmly, "Do I have any reason to lie to you?" Kiyotoichi shook his head, "It's just too shocking, I can hardly believe it. Yorua, that kid, already has the strength to take down an elite Jonin. It seems he could easily defeat me now. That puts my mind at ease. If he follows you out of the village on missions, I won't have to worry about him anymore." Despite saying this, Kiyotoichi still felt a bit desolate. After all, he was Yorua's real teacher, yet Yorua's strength wasn't because of him. Kakashi noticed what Kiyotoichi was thinking and patted his shoulder, comforting him. "You didn't reveal his strength to the village at first, but protected him. That makes you the best person for him. During this past month, he mentioned you quite a bit. I know you are very important to him." In this, Kakashi wasn't lying. Although Kiyotoichi hadn't taught Yorua much ninjutsu and had been his teacher for a very short time, in Yorua's heart, Kiyotoichi had always been his teacher, and a very important one at that. Kakashi was willing to teach him, and after he could showcase his abilities, he remained stable until now, all because of Kiyotoichi. Yorua could feel Kiyotoichi's kindness towards him. So when Kakashi initially offered to take him as a disciple, Yorua first thought about Kiyotoichi's feelings. If Kiyotoichi had disagreed back then, Yorua would have certainly refused Kakashi, even knowing that following Kakashi would be better. In fact, Kiyotoichi ultimately chose what was best for Yorua. Kiyotoichi nodded, sighing, "It's precisely because of this child's character that I worry and think about him so much. Even though I haven't taught him much, he will always be my proudest student." Kakashi understood Kiyotoichi's feelings because he felt the same way about Yorua. Meanwhile, Yorua, Sakura, and Naruto followed Sasuke to the Uchiha clan's territory. The tranquil atmosphere around them made Sakura and Naruto a bit scared. With nightfall approaching, aside from the occasional chirping of insects and birds, only the streetlights by the roadside were lit. The houses around were quite beautiful. Yet, there were hardly any people on the streets, making it eerily quiet, like a ghost town. It was Sakura and Naruto's first time here, and they were completely unaccustomed to this atmosphere. Naruto was so nervous he clung tightly to Yorua, afraid something sinister might jump out from the roadside. Sakura was also scared, but she didn't want to show it in front of Sasuke. Walking beside Sasuke, she said nothing. Sasuke, on the other hand, was already used to this atmosphere. Although it was Yorua's first time here, he showed no fear. However, his brow was furrowed, and his expression was grave. It wasn't because he was scared, but because he was thinking about how Sasuke had lived in such an environment for 5 years. It's hard to believe. He had actually lived here for 5 years. Yorua couldn't imagine how Sasuke had managed all this time. For a 7-year-old child, to pass through such a grim place every day for 5 years, his mental resilience must be incredibly strong. This place was far too desolate, nothing like the eerie and terrifying grounds of the Uchiha clan. The group walked in silence for a long time before Yorua spoke up, "Why do you keep living here?" Yorua couldn't believe the village would let Sasuke stay here indefinitely. There was hardly anyone around, and if something happened, help wouldn't arrive in time. Even if the third Hokage didn't care about Sasuke's safety, with Itachi Uchiha watching from outside, the third would never let anything happen to Sasuke. In fact, the third really did care about Sasuke's safety. He would never willingly let Sasuke live here. Sasuke glanced around, seemingly accustomed to it, and said calmly, "Living here makes me feel like they haven't left." Yorua knew who Sasuke was referring to. For a moment, Yorua didn't know what to say. He couldn't imagine how Sasuke had managed all these years. Sakura looked at Sasuke's furrowed brow and felt a pang of sympathy. But she didn't know how to comfort him. Now, Sakura could personally feel Sasuke's inner pain. The entire clan had been wiped out, Sakura couldn't imagine what it would be like if her parents were killed and she returned home to silence instead of their chatter. She used to think it would be freeing, but now she felt lucky. Compared to Sasuke, at least her family was still around. Naruto was unusually quiet. He could understand Sasuke's situation too. Sasuke had once been very happy, but then everything was taken away overnight. Naruto, on the other hand, had never had anything to begin with. Yet their feelings were completely different. No one spoke as they walked through the former streets of the Uchiha clan, finally arriving at Sasuke's home. Sasuke's house undeniably had the grandeur of a prestigious family, with a very large area. Among the group, Sasuke's home was certainly the largest. But the vast house was empty, and living here every day was indeed a test of courage. Someone with a weaker heart might be scared to death. In the living room, the group sat together. This was the first time Sasuke had invited classmates to his home. In the past, his mother would have come out to entertain guests. But now, it was just Sasuke alone. They sat in silence for a long time, no one speaking. Sensing the heavy atmosphere, Yaru decided to break the silence. Sasuke, didn't your clan leave behind any methods for training the Sharingan? Sasuke shook his head. It's probably been taken by that old guy Danzō. Yaru thought to himself. I've heard Kakashi-sensei talk about some characteristics of the Sharingan. Hearing this, Sasuke looked up, his face filled with anticipation. Yaru thought for a moment and said, the Sharingan is activated through intense emotional upheaval. Did you experience any strong emotional waves when you first awakened your Sharingan? Sasuke fell silent. He recalled the night of the massacre. Clenching his teeth and fists, he struggled to control his emotions. Sakura and Naruto looked at Sasuke with concern. Sasuke, are you okay? Yaru didn't say anything, quietly watching Sasuke. He knew what Sasuke was remembering. It seems the process of awakening your Sharingan wasn't easy. Intense emotional waves can be extreme hatred, extreme love, or even extreme jealousy. I think these emotional changes can all trigger the Sharingan. Sasuke looked up at Yaru, knowing a bit about this. When he was younger, Itachi had mentioned it to him. Sasuke actually knew about the Mangekyo Sharingan, he just didn't know its name. When Itachi left, he had shown it to him. After thinking for a moment, Sasuke told Yaru, Itachi's Sharingan was different from any I've seen. It wasn't Tomoe, but another complex pattern. Oh, could there be a type of Sharingan beyond the three Tomoe Sharingan? Yaru asked. Of course, Yaru knew about the Mangekyo Sharingan, but Sasuke didn't. He needed to guide Sasuke to realize the existence of the Mangekyo Sharingan. Chapter 104 Sasuke also fell into deep thought. However, the conversation between Yaru and Sasuke left Naruto and Sakura completely confused, as they had no idea what the two were talking about. They didn't know much about the Uchiha clan, only that it was a very powerful family that had been wiped out. Sasuke looked at Yaru and said with a hint of doubt, maybe, his Sharingan is very strong. Yaru knew that Sasuke had realized the existence of a Sharingan beyond the three Tomoe Sharingan. He then suggested, perhaps there are some records in your family's books? Judging from Sasuke's return to Hidden Leaf Village during the Fourth Great Ninja War, Danzō hadn't managed to take away all the Uchiha clan's documents. For Danzō, the most important information was likely about the Sharingan. He probably wasn't interested in the clan's historical records. Sasuke thought of something. Our family's shrine might have records on this. Yaru asked, do you know where it is? Do you want to check it out? Encouraged by Yaru, Sasuke stood up, feeling a bit tempted. Let's go and take a look. Yaru also stood up and said, then let's go search. Maybe there's information about your brother's Sharingan. Sasuke frowned, he's not my brother. Sasuke was very averse to Yaru referring to Itachi Uchiha as his brother. Itachi was the one who slaughtered his entire family, and no matter how close they might have been before, Sasuke couldn't forgive him now. Sorry, then let's go. Actually, I also want to learn more about your family. Naruto, Sakura, do you want to come? Naruto and Sakura, who had been completely bewildered and had no idea what Yaru and Sasuke were discussing, quickly said, of course, we're coming. However, both of them treated this action as an adventure game. In the past, outsiders would never have been allowed into the Uchiha clan's shrine. But now that the Uchiha clan was gone, Sasuke naturally didn't mind. Soon, Sasuke led the group to the Uchiha clan's shrine. Although it was somewhat dilapidated, it was clear that someone had been maintaining it. It was likely people from the village, as the shrine had once belonged to the Uchiha clan, and the village wouldn't let such an important place fall into ruin, even if just for appearances. The group arrived at the entrance of the shrine. Sakura and Naruto were quite scared. It was even more eerie and terrifying than the deserted street they had just passed. Sakura couldn't stay calm and kept clutching Sasuke's clothes. Naruto held onto Yorua's arm, looking around nervously, afraid that something creepy might jump out. Yorua was a bit speechless. But he knew Naruto's personality. Naruto wasn't actually very brave. So Yorua didn't bother with what Naruto was doing. Upon entering the shrine, they found many tablets dedicated to the ancestors of the Uchiha clan. Looking at the neatly arranged tablets, Sasuke felt a bit dazed. It had been a long time since he had come here, and nothing seemed to have changed since his last visit. Yorua stood in front of the tablets, gazing at the densely packed names. He could sense how powerful the Uchiha clan had once been. Warriors. There were hundreds of memorial tablets here, indicating that the Uchiha clan had lost hundreds of powerful members in the past. Standing before these tablets, Yorua solemnly bowed to them. After all, he was here not only to help Sasuke find records of the Sharingan but also because he was genuinely interested in the history of the Uchiha clan. Although the Hidden Leaf Village Public Library had some information about the Uchiha, it wasn't detailed. Seeing Yorua bow to the tablets, even though they didn't fully understand the situation, Naruto and Sakura followed suit and bowed a few times as well. Sasuke watched their actions, feeling somewhat moved. He remembered how, in the past, clan members would pay their respects to these tablets when visiting the shrine. Unfortunately, no one did that anymore. After Yorua and the others finished their respects, Sasuke led them to the back of the shrine. Behind the main hall of the shrine lay a large, flat stone monument. Pointing to the monument, Sasuke said, "I once saw clan members enter the shrine through here. Below, there's a secret chamber where the Uchiha clan's records are kept. But I don't know how to open this monument, my father took me in back then." And Naruto and Sakura, unsure of what was happening, stood silently to the side. Today, their worldview had been shaken. For the first time, they felt the vast difference between ninja clans and civilians. Yorua, on the other hand, stared at the monument for a long time, then turned to Sasuke and said, "I think the way to open this monument is written on it. These mysterious characters should be the key to unlocking it. Try looking at the monument with your Sharingan, you should be able to understand it." Sasuke was taken aback. He had visited several times before but never found a way to open the monument. Sasuke had never thought of using the Sharingan to examine the characters on the monument. But since Yorua suggested it, he thought he might indeed find a way to open it. Standing before the monument, Sasuke focused his gaze. As he channeled chakra into his eyes, the Sharingan activated in an instant. When he looked at the monument, he suddenly realized that the mysterious characters he couldn't recognize before were now completely comprehensible. With a look of joy, Sasuke said, "Yorua, you're right. The method to open the monument is written right here." Yorua smiled. "I guessed correctly. The Uchiha clan would certainly use a method that only they could decipher to set the way to open the monument." Sasuke nodded happily. "I hadn't thought of that before. So that's how it is." After reading the characters, Sasuke knew how to open the monument. He looked at Yorua and said, "I know how to open it now." Yorua understood Sasuke's intentions and pulled Naruto and Sakura back a few steps. From the beginning, Sakura and Naruto had been in a state of confusion, completely unaware of what Yorua and Sasuke were doing. They thought, weren't they here to train? How did it turn into an adventure game? To them, the group's actions felt like an adventure game. The environment was particularly fitting. Sasuke stood in front of the monument, forming hand seals. Seal release. After completing the seals, he placed one hand on the monument. As Sasuke transferred chakra from his hand to the monument, the heavy stone began to slowly move forward. Boom, boom, boom. The movement of the massive stone was loud, considering it weighed several tons. The surroundings were filled with dust from the monument's movement. As the stone moved, a passageway appeared beneath it. Sasuke was thrilled. He was about to uncover the secrets of the Sharingan. Yorua was also pleased. He was about to learn the history of the Uchiha clan. Yorua wasn't particularly interested in the Uchiha's jutsu, knowing that many of them were related to the Sharingan. Learning them wouldn't be of much use to him. But he was very interested in the history of the Uchiha clan. After all, his understanding of the Uchiha had faded over time, and when he watched Naruto, it didn't delve deeply into the Uchiha's history. Meanwhile, Sakura and Naruto felt as if they had opened a hidden treasure trove. They had always viewed this mission as an adventure game. Chapter 105. After the stone tablet was completely moved aside, it revealed the passage leading to the underground chamber. A gust of cold wind blew out from within, causing Naruto and Sakura to shiver. The eerie atmosphere made both of them quite scared. However, seeing that Yorua and Sasuke were unfazed, they felt embarrassed to say anything. Sasuke turned to look at Yorua. In the past, it was always his father who brought him here, and he wasn't sure if there were any traps in the chamber. He didn't dare to casually lead Yorua, Naruto, and the others down. Yorua smiled. "Let's go down and take a look first." Sasuke nodded. He was also worried that there might be traps in the chamber, which could potentially harm Sakura and Naruto. Although Sasuke usually seemed to look down on Sakura and Naruto, deep down, they were already very good friends to him. Otherwise, he would never have agreed to let them come to the Uchiha clan's shrine. Sakura and Naruto glanced around and realized that staying above was scarier than following Yorua and Sasuke down. So they quickly said, "Yorua, Sasuke, we'll go down together, we're not afraid." Yorua looked at them, and their fear was written all over their faces. After thinking for a moment, Yorua said helplessly, "But there might be traps in the chamber, and it's dangerous for you to go down together." Sasuke nodded, agreeing with Yorua's statement. Sakura stepped forward and said, "Since Sasuke has been here before, there definitely won't be any danger." Seeing Sakura's frightened expression, Yorua shook his head, feeling quite helpless. "Sasuke, take them with us." Although he knew they were scared, Yorua didn't point it out. Sasuke glanced at Yorua and instantly understood his intention. Although he was somewhat worried about their safety, he agreed, knowing Yorua was there. Once Yorua and Sasuke agreed, Sakura and Naruto breathed a sigh of relief. From the beginning, they had been very sensitive to the surrounding atmosphere, which was too eerie and terrifying. They couldn't understand how Sasuke had lived in such an environment for so many years. The four of them approached the entrance to the chamber. There was a stone staircase leading down, and from the entrance, the chamber was completely dark and invisible. Sasuke looked at Yorua, who nodded, and the two of them entered the chamber first. Sakura and Naruto cautiously followed them inside. Even Sasuke was a bit nervous, as in the past, he had always come with his father when there were people in the chamber. Now, he wasn't sure if there would be any traps. Tap, tap, tap. The four of them stepped into the chamber, surrounded by stone structures. Fortunately, as they entered the passage, lights on the walls automatically lit up. But the more this happened, the more Yorua felt a sense of danger. After walking for over 10 meters, they still hadn't reached the chamber. The passage was long, and no one spoke, but the tension in the air was increasing. Sakura walked right behind Sasuke, holding on to his clothes. Naruto had taken out a kunai, gripping it in one hand while clutching Yorua's clothes with the other. In the passage, only the sound of their footsteps echoed, and the footsteps were very pronounced. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Just as they turned a corner, the sound of something slicing through the air suddenly appeared. At the corner, neither Naruto nor Sakura had time to react. Sasuke, having already activated his Sharingan, noticed something was amiss. But when he saw the incoming weapons through his Sharingan, he was terrified. Countless kunai and shuriken were shooting towards them at an incredible speed, much faster than those thrown by a ninja, and with much greater force. The sound of a sonic boom even accompanied them. "Watch out!" Sasuke shouted, having seen the threat with his Sharingan, but his body couldn't react in time. He could only warn the others. But it was too late. In an instant, the barrage of kunai and shuriken appeared right in front of them. Sasuke could only watch helplessly as these ninja tools came hurtling towards them. At that moment, Sasuke felt deep regret. "I shouldn't have let them come in with me," he thought, filled with guilt. The sheer number and speed of these kunai and shuriken were overwhelming. He couldn't possibly block them all, they were too fast, too heavy, too numerous. His body couldn't even respond, and the weapons were less than a meter away. If Sasuke was struggling, Sakura and Naruto were even worse off. They hadn't even seen the kunai and shuriken appear, they only heard Sasuke's warning. Confused, they didn't understand what Sasuke was cautioning them about. Just as the deadly barrage was about to strike them, a flash of golden light appeared. Z-lightning style, thunder net clang clang clang. In an instant, countless kunai and shuriken clashed against the golden shield. The sound of metal clashing filled the air, sparks flew, and iron fragments scattered, leaving the surrounding stone walls riddled with holes from the damaged weapons. The assault of kunai and shuriken lasted a full 2 seconds, with hundreds of them striking the golden shield. It was only after the sound of metal and the sparks faded that Sasuke, Naruto, and Sakura realized what had happened. They looked at the golden light enveloping them. Golden arcs of electricity, containing terrifying energy, flickered across the surface. These arcs had formed a golden shield, protecting them within. Sasuke and Naruto had never seen such a jutsu before. But Sakura had. She turned to Yorua. Yorua, if it weren't for you, we'd be dead. That scared me to death." Having seen it before, Sakura was still somewhat shocked but not incredulous. Naruto and Sasuke, however, had never witnessed Yorua display such formidable power and were stunned into silence. They had seen Yorua fight a few times before, but never using lightning-style techniques. When Yorua had fought against Naruto in his berserk state, he had used the same jutsu, but Naruto had been unconscious and had no memory of it. Yorua's lightning style, Thundernet, was blindingly bright, almost painfully so. But they couldn't worry about that now. Both were awestruck by Yorua's power, as if witnessing a miracle. Neither noticed that Yorua had released the thunder net without forming any hand seals. That's right, after some improvements, Yorua's lightning-style techniques no longer required hand seals, he could release them by simply gathering chakra. Just now, Yorua had sensed an attack and immediately deployed the thunder net. It took only a thought to activate it instantaneously. After a while, Sasuke and Naruto snapped back to reality and turned to Yorua. "Yorua, is this your power?" Yorua replied calmly, "Let's talk inside. Be careful, there are really traps in here." Although Sasuke and Naruto were intensely curious about Yorua's power, they had to suppress their questions for now and wait until they were inside. Yorua maintained the thunder net, which not only provided illumination but also guarded against potential attacks. Chapter 106. The four continued towards the secret chamber. After walking another dozen meters, they finally saw the end of the passage. As the distant lights flickered on, they spotted the Uchiha clan emblem right in the center of the chamber. "We've finally arrived." Just as they were about to enter the chamber, terrifying flames suddenly erupted from the surrounding walls. The fiery red blaze surged towards them. The passage leading to the chamber, spanning 5 or 6 meters, was completely engulfed in flames. The four found themselves right in the middle of the inferno. However, as soon as the flames touched the lightning net, they were blasted away. A vacuum zone formed between the flames and the lightning net. Flames hot enough to melt steel couldn't even budge the lightning net. The four protected within it didn't feel a hint of heat. Being surrounded by a sea of fire, watching the fiery red flames burn around them, was still incredibly awe-inspiring. They even noticed that the once smooth walls had now developed several cracks, split open by the intense heat. This was a testament to the extreme temperature of the flames. Yet, such terrifying flames couldn't affect them in the slightest, and they didn't even feel the heat. All thanks to the golden lightning enveloping them. Once again, the three were astounded by Yorua's power. Yorua hadn't wanted to use it, but the mechanism set by the Uchiha clan here had flames too hot to be blocked by water-style jutsu. Moreover, using water-style jutsu in this enclosed space against such high-temperature flames would create a massive amount of steam, potentially turning the shrine into ruins. Yorua was quite exasperated. Your Uchiha clan is really ruthless. These traps are impossible for even a jonin to handle. Sasuke shot Yorua a look. "I never encountered these when I came in before. Clearly, these mechanisms can be deactivated. And you have the nerve to say even a jonin can't handle it. What are you doing now? Traps that even jonin can't handle, yet you dealt with them effortlessly. You don't seem to be struggling at all." Yorua sensed Sasuke's deep envy and jealousy. He didn't want to stay there any longer. The flames hadn't dissipated, and staying even a second longer would consume a large amount of chakra. The flames were extremely hot, and the lightning net consumed a lot of chakra as well. Even though his chakra recovered quickly, he didn't want to linger. He especially didn't want to fuel Sasuke and Naruto's envy. "Let's go in. Stay here any longer, and we'll be roasted." Although they didn't feel any heat, Sasuke and the others genuinely thought Yorua was struggling to maintain the jutsu. After all, they could see how high the flame's temperature was. The flames were so bright they were almost blinding, indicating the temperature couldn't be low. Especially Sasuke, who had mastered some fire-style jutsu, knew that the flames from this trap were far hotter than anything he could produce. After they entered the chamber, the flames in the passage dissipated. The once smooth, bright walls were now charred and rough, riddled with countless cracks. If the flames had burned a bit longer, the stone walls might have turned to ash. As soon as the mechanism was triggered, the oil lamps around automatically lit up, illuminating the entire secret chamber. The whole room was laid bare for all to see. Yorua looked at the ancient chamber and nodded. As expected of a prestigious family, you can't achieve this kind of antiquity without some heritage. While Yorua was admiring the chamber's setup, Sasuke stood in front of him, eyes fixed intently on him. Naruto did the same. Sakura, frightened by the two, hid behind Yorua. Soon, Yorua also noticed their intense gazes, causing him to take a step back, fearing they might have some peculiar interests. "What do you want?" Sasuke asked coldly. "The jutsu you just used, was it taught by Kakashi?" "Yeah, it must have been Kakashi-sensei who taught you, right?" Yorua sighed in relief. "Yes, it was Kakashi-sensei who taught me." "Is there a problem?" Although this jutsu was developed by Yorua himself, he naturally couldn't admit it. After all, by saying this, the two would definitely seek out Kakashi instead of him. At that moment, Kakashi, who was at home reading a newly purchased novel, suddenly sneezed several times. He looked out the window, frowning. "Who on earth is thinking about me? It must be Guy," he muttered to himself before returning to his book with great focus. Clearly, Jiraiya's new work was quite captivating. Back in the secret chamber, Sasuke and Naruto were a bit upset upon hearing it was Kakashi who taught him. Kakashi actually treats you so well, teaching you such a powerful jutsu. Sasuke said, a hint of jealousy in his voice. Naruto nodded in agreement. If you didn't look different from Kakashi, I'd really think you were his son. Yoru was at a loss for words. You don't have to be so upset. If you want to learn and meet the conditions, Kakashi-sensei will definitely teach you too. The reason Kakashi-sensei hasn't taught you isn't that he doesn't want to, but because you haven't mastered many basics yet. How could he teach you? The jutsu I used just now is a forbidden technique. If you're not careful, it could backfire, and you wouldn't even know how you died. So you should focus on honing your basics first. Listening to Yoru, Sasuke nodded. He agreed with this point. Having trained with his father and Itachi Uchiha before, he understood the importance of fundamentals. Naruto, on the other hand, didn't quite get it. Standing to the side with his arms crossed, he pouted, I saw you use it so easily, without any hint of danger. You're just bluffing. Although he knew Yoru was strong, Naruto still believed that the jutsu was taught by Kakashi. If Naruto knew he didn't have the lightning chakra nature, making it extremely difficult to learn this jutsu, who knows what he would think. Sakura stood behind Yoru, watching him spin his tail. Even though Sakura didn't know about Yoru's jutsu, she had seen Kakashi fight several times. In his battles with Zabuza, even when pushed to the brink, he hadn't used it. Clearly, this jutsu wasn't something Kakashi taught Yoru. Otherwise, Kakashi would have used it in battle. However, she didn't expose him. She was increasingly convinced that Yoru was far stronger than Kakashi. In several battles, she had been by Yoru's side, and his displayed strength far surpassed Kakashi's. Moreover, Yoru's lightning style was golden, while Kakashi's was blue. They were completely different colors. And Yoru's lightning style was evidently much more powerful than Kakashi's. She definitely didn't believe it was Kakashi who taught Yoru his lightning techniques. Standing behind Yoru, Sakura thought to herself, Yoru, just what kind of person are you? From the first day she met Yoru, Sakura felt he was very mysterious. He seemed like a black hole, impossible to truly understand. Chapter 107. In response to Naruto's words, Yoru didn't answer. Instead, he changed the topic, saying, let's see if there's any record of the Sharingan here. Don't forget the reason we came here. After Yoru's reminder, the others finally remembered their purpose for being there and began searching the secret room. Yoru didn't join in the search, his gaze was fixed on a stone beneath the Uchiha clan emblem. Mysterious characters were carved into the stone. Is this the stone that records the history of the Uchiha clan? He wondered. But it seems to have been altered by Black Zetsu, turning Madara Uchiha into a clown after decades of plotting. Soon, Sasuke, Naruto, and Sakura placed the books they found in front of Yoru. All the books from this secret room are here. There shouldn't be any missing, they said. Yoru glanced at the pile of books before him. Sasuke, are you sure we can read these books? Yoru asked. These involve the secrets of your Uchiha clan. He didn't open them but instead sought Sasuke's consent. Naruto, who had already reached out to open a book, withdrew his hand. He and Sakura both looked at Sasuke. Sasuke calmly replied, the Uchiha clan is gone. Keeping these records here serves no purpose. What's the point of not reading them? Go ahead and read. There might be some beneficial jutsu for you in there. He added. For Sasuke, the Uchiha clan was already destroyed. His sole purpose now was to become strong enough to seek revenge against Itachi Uchiha. These records held no value for him. With Sasuke's permission, Yoru said, alright, let's read them. Each of them picked up a book. Yoru chose the history of the Uchiha clan. Naruto picked up a book on Uchiha clan jutsu. Sakura selected one on Uchiha clan Ganjutsu. Sasuke took a book related to the Sharingan. For a while, the secret room was silent, with everyone's attention focused on the books in their hands. After a long time, Yoru was the first to close his book. He now had a general understanding of the Uchiha clan's history. Many events not in his memory were clearly documented, including the history before Madara Uchiha. After reading, Yoru couldn't help but remark, Madara Uchiha truly was the most outstanding ninja of the Uchiha clan, occupying a tenth of the clan's historical records. Considering the Uchiha clan's history spans over 1,000 years, the fact that Madara's records take up a tenth shows just how significant he was to the clan. Yoru looked at Sasuke, who was still engrossed in his book, and asked, do you know what comes after the three Tomoe Sharingan now? Sasuke looked up, puzzled. His focus had been entirely on how to develop the Sharingan, not on what came next. Seeing Sasuke's confused expression, Yoru sighed. Are you focusing on the wrong thing? Don't start by looking at how to develop the Sharingan. First, Look at the different types of Sharingan and their characteristics. These are the basics. Didn't your father teach you this before? Fugaku only taught Sasuke a few fire-style jutsus. As for the use or characteristics of the Sharingan, he wouldn't teach that at all, because at that time, Sasuke hadn't awakened his Sharingan yet. Sasuke only knew some basic attributes of the Sharingan, knowledge that even non-Uchiha clan members were aware of. Sasuke felt a bit embarrassed. This book contains many methods for developing the Sharingan. I got too absorbed in it. Sakura and Naruto looked over, but they couldn't make much sense of it either. As for Naruto, he couldn't understand what was written in the book at all. He recognized the words, but when put together, they made no sense to him. This was the limit of his abilities as the dead last in ninja school. The only things he learned there were literacy and some basic ninja tool throwing techniques, and even those weren't at a high level. As for the theoretical knowledge of ninjas and ninjutsu, it was best not to trouble Naruto with that. Sakura, on the other hand, understood it and found it quite rewarding. She was very interested in the Genjutsu described in the book. She was shocked by the power of the Uchiha clan's Genjutsu, even thinking to herself, as expected of the Uchiha clan, once the prestigious family of Hidden Leaf Village. Although most of the Genjutsu recorded in the book required the use of the Sharingan, there were several that could be used without it. And it was those few Genjutsu that piqued Sakura's interest. Seeing the three of them looking over, Yorua said, "I've finished reading about the history of the Uchiha clan. It mentions that after the three Tomoe Sharingan, there is a type of eye called the Mangekyo Sharingan. It's an eye with mysterious powers, and it also hides powerful ocular jutsu. I think Itachi Uchiha's eyes are the Mangekyo Sharingan. If he truly possesses the Mangekyo Sharingan, he would indeed be very difficult to deal with. Because in the 1,000-year history of your Uchiha clan, there haven't been many ninjas who could awaken the Mangekyo Sharingan. In fact, you could say there have only been a few. According to historical records, before the founding of Hidden Leaf Village, there was an Uchiha ninja named Madara who awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan. His power was so great that no ninja in the entire ninja world at the time dared to look directly into his eyes. And those eyes possessed godlike powers, even the ability to easily destroy a country and control the Nightingales." Sasuke was stunned as he listened to Yorua's words. He didn't know any of this. Not just Sasuke, even Sakura and Naruto were dumbfounded after hearing Yorua's explanation. Naruto asked seriously, "What kind of power can easily destroy a country? And, can those eyes really control the Nine Tails?" Naruto was well aware of how powerful the Nine Tails was. Although he often lost his memory or even completely forgot after going berserk, the aftermath of the destruction and Sakura's descriptions made him understand the terrifying power of the Nine Tails. Yet such a powerful Nine Tails could be controlled. And it wasn't just one pair of eyes, Sasuke's brother had a pair too. Although Naruto loathed the Nine Tails, it was sealed within him, meaning the Mangekyo Sharingan could easily control him as well. Naruto was very worried, believing that Yorua wouldn't lie to him. There truly existed a power in this world that could control the Nine Tails, and it wasn't difficult. Naruto's trembling words drew the attention of the three. Yorua reassured him, "Don't worry, as long as you gain the Nine Tails acknowledgement, the Mangekyo Sharingan will have a hard time controlling you." The Mangekyo Sharingan's control over a Jinchuriki could easily be broken by the tailed beast within. The premise was that the tailed beast inside the Jinchuriki was willing to help break the control. Most Jinchuriki couldn't coexist peacefully with their tailed beasts, unlike Killer Bee. So many Jinchuriki would be done for once controlled by the Sharingan. Yorua glanced at Naruto's abdomen and continued, "And even if you were really controlled by the Sharingan's Genjutsu, the Nine Tails would definitely help you break free, because you're its Jinchuriki. If something happened to you, it would suffer too." Hearing this explanation, Naruto breathed a sigh of relief. He was really worried, as this record had a lot to do with him. Chapter 108 Sasuke was utterly shaken by the overwhelming power of the Mangekyo Sharingan. In Yorua's description, the Mangekyo Sharingan was simply too powerful. Especially when Yorua mentioned Madara Uchiha, it was said that no ninja in the entire shinobi world could meet his gaze directly. So strong, so impressive. That kind of power was exactly what Sasuke needed. Clenching his fist, his eyes narrowed slightly. "As long as I awaken the Mangekyo Sharingan, I can kill him, right?" "I definitely can. You'll have to work hard for that, I'm afraid. It's quite clear that Itachi Uchiha also possesses the Mangekyo Sharingan." Yorua replied. "But I've always believed that you'll surpass him in the future, and by a significant margin." Sasuke was taken aback, looking at Yorua with confusion. "Why are you so sure?" Yorua smiled, "Because I can see you have great potential. Most importantly, you have a goal you must achieve, and you're the kind of person who would give up everything to accomplish it. That's why I have faith in you." These words were, of course, something Yorua made up on the spot. But the outcome was certain because Yorua knew what the future held. He just seemed to forget that his presence had already changed many things. Hearing Yorua's words, Sasuke's expression became complex. Yorua had great confidence in him, but such expectations were indeed a heavy burden. At some point, Yorua had become very important to him. The expectations of someone important were a significant weight for him. However, Sasuke still mustered the courage and said coldly, "Of course, I can do it, and in the future, I will definitely defeat you too." Perhaps seeing Sasuke's determination, Naruto, not wanting to be left behind, stood up and clenched his fist towards Yorua, saying, "And me, one day I'll definitely defeat you, Yorua." "Sasuke, on this point, we finally agree," Naruto said, looking at Sasuke with great anticipation. But Sasuke ignored him. Although he had indeed thought about defeating Yorua in the future, he had little confidence in himself. In his heart, Yorua had already become someone even stronger and more insurmountable than Itachi Uchiha. Yet, he didn't harbor any hostility towards Yorua. Because he truly considered Yorua a friend. A very important friend. The things Yorua had said to him before had benefited him greatly. He also understood that Yorua genuinely cared for him. Over the years, he felt that Yorua was someone who truly cared about him. Of course, all of this was Sasuke's own perception. Yorua's reason for saying those things was more about hoping Sasuke wouldn't cling to him, as it was too troublesome. Now, Sasuke felt that defeating Itachi Uchiha was possible, and he even believed that following Yorua's methods, there was a significant chance of achieving it. But he didn't think he could ever defeat Yorua. Yorua's growth was too rapid, he couldn't even see Yorua's shadow now. Naturally, he wouldn't try to chase after Yorua anymore. When the gap isn't too wide, jealousy might arise. But when you can't even see the other person's shadow, there's a high chance you won't consider them a rival, because you don't even know where your opponent is. This was Sasuke's current mindset. So he didn't agree with Naruto's words. He even thought Naruto was a bit foolish. Even a fool could see the gap in strength between them, yet Naruto had this inexplicable confidence that he could surpass Yorua tomorrow, which made it hard for him to agree. Seeing that Sasuke was ignoring him, Naruto angrily gritted his teeth. "Damn it, Sasuke, don't you think you can surpass Yorua?" Seeing the two about to clash, Yorua had no choice but to step in and hold Naruto back. "Alright, Naruto, I'm right here. I welcome your challenges anytime, so just work hard. There's no need to keep emphasizing it. Sasuke probably thinks the same as you do, but who wants to keep saying it out loud all the time? As a true strong person, you should have the demeanor of one, and definitely not be as impulsive as you are. Masters are often silent, just do it. The less you talk, the cooler you are, right?" Naruto was taken aback by what he heard. He even started imagining himself as a master, stepping over Yorua, with Sakura throwing herself into his arms. He couldn't help but laugh out loud. Yorua was speechless. Is he really losing it with his delusions? Yorua shook his head. A bit exhausted. The fact that someone with Naruto's personality could accomplish those things later on was a miracle to Yorua. Sakura also noticed what Naruto was thinking. She distanced herself from him. Naruto was immersed in Yorua's words for a long time. It seemed Yorua's words resonated with him, and afterward, he even deliberately tried to put on a cool face like Sasuke's. But with his personality, he couldn't keep it up for long before he cracked. Yorua didn't bother with him anymore. Sasuke looked at Yorua and asked, "Who is this Madara Uchiha you mentioned earlier? Is he really that strong?" Sasuke was still interested in such matters. Sakura was also curious. She knew the Uchiha clan was prestigious, but she rarely heard of any masters from the Uchiha clan. Of course, that was because the Uchiha clan was wiped out when Sakura was very young. Where would she have heard about them? Moreover, even the ninja of Hidden Leaf Village knew very little about Madara Uchiha. Even more absurdly, the Uchiha clan themselves knew very little about Madara Uchiha. Yorua didn't understand why they kept the history of the Uchiha clan sealed away instead of teaching it to the younger generation. In fact, it wasn't just the Uchiha clan. Hidden Leaf Village's ninja also weren't very knowledgeable about their predecessor's history. Despite the first Hokage being one of the founders of Hidden Leaf Village, there was hardly any discussion about him. Many ninja didn't even know the first Hokage's name. It was truly absurd. Even Senju Hashirama received this treatment, let alone the even more taboo Madara Uchiha. Sasuke's understanding of Madara Uchiha was completely blank, he knew nothing. Yorua now understood, so he explained. The records state that Madara Uchiha was once the leader of the Uchiha clan, a powerful ninja with the Mangekyo Sharingan, and a legendary ninja who ended the era of warring states alongside the first Hokage, Senju Hashirama. He was also one of the founders of Hidden Leaf Village, alongside the first Hokage. He possessed the power to destroy a nation, and his ninjutsu was so powerful it could change the terrain. He ultimately chose to leave Hidden Leaf Village. Afterwards, for reasons unknown, he returned to Hidden Leaf Village and attempted to forcibly change the village. The first Hokage intervened to stop him, and the two clashed at the Valley of the End, a place created by their ninjutsu. This clearly shows that both Madara Uchiha and the first Hokage possessed power that surpassed the era. It can be said that Madara Uchiha's strength was the greatest in the entire ninja world at the time, second only to the first Hokage. Sasuke, Naruto, and Sakura were left speechless as they listened to these stories. They couldn't imagine what kind of power Madara Uchiha possessed to be as formidable as Yorua described. After finishing his story, Yorua looked at Sasuke and said seriously, "Sasuke, I believe that one day you can become as powerful as Madara Uchiha, maybe even surpass him. By the way, open your book and see what it says about the Mangekyo Sharingan." Yorua's words snapped the three out of their daze. Seeing the resentful looks they gave him, Yorua said helplessly, "Why are you looking at me like that? We have important things to do. There will be plenty of opportunities to tell these stories later." Sasuke hadn't realized it himself, but his personality had changed during his time with Yorua. He was no longer as extreme or reckless as before. Although he still wanted revenge, he believed in Yorua's words about taking things step by step. He glanced at Naruto and Sakura sitting on either side of him, and Yorua standing in front of him. He realized he was not alone. There were too many people he couldn't bear to lose now. Even Yorua himself didn't know that his casual words, meant to keep Sasuke from bothering him, were taken seriously. It even changed Sasuke's mindset.